His force consisted of 2,000 men. They counted 1,400 light and heavy cavalry, augmented with 600 archers. The plan was to wait until the Blackfish attacked the northern camp with the vanguard. Then he and Rob would each attack the southern and middle camps at the same time. His victory would depend on the effect of surprise. If they were found out, they would lose. They were sat in position, waiting silently. Finally, the sound of horns and battle was heard across the river. He saw how the camp in front of him was waking up in chaos. Now was the time. He gave the sound to blow the horns, and they were met with horns from the other side of the river. Mixed in was the distinct sound of a direwolf howling in the night. He sounded the charge, and they rode into the camp like a storm. He plunged the spear he held into the neck of a half-dressed guard. He then swung his sword at other men, left and right and left again. They managed to quickly break through half of the camp, but soon they were stopped in the middle as the enemy managed to form a shield wall. He pulled on his reins, shying away from it. He saw how a few hundred archers were starting to form up behind the line of spears and didn't want to expose his troops to that. He shouted out, "Cavalry, back from here! Charge to the other corners of the camp, kill every enemy in sight but leave the shield wall be. Bring up the archers to shoot at the archers behind." He shouted to Domeric Bolton to swing back left and kill all Lannisters that hadn't managed to retreat behind the spears, while he commanded Sir Stephen Free and his grandsons to do the same to the right. He himself called out to Roose Riswell, and together they turned and spread their own horse through the middle. He saw a group of dazed Westermen in front of him and rode out, splitting the first man's skull and slashing the second one's neck open. His men easily trampling or killing the few dozen others. He saw the archers being brought up by Lord Deddings. The river landlord was also keen set on revenge. He had been on his way to Riverrun to join Edmure Tully when he heard of his defeat. When he marched back home, his keep and family were in ruins. The other Lannister force had sacked it and killed his wife. The archers formed up and both sides began pelting each other. In the meantime, he scoured the camp for survivors, killing every Lannister he could see. He returned towards the shield wall a few minutes later. He saw how his archers were doing damage but were slowly losing the ranged battle, so he pulled them back. Not daring to directly charge the well-organized line, he retreated his force out of the camp and told them to spread out. If he couldn't quickly kill the fuckers, let's pin them here against the river until they have to come out or Rob comes to his aid. An hour later he saw how his enemy left their camp. Their archers hugged the river with their spears in front. In rage as he thought about his brother and cousin, he gathered all his men and ordered a charge. They rode at speed towards the soldiers. In some parts they were quick enough to form up their spears, but not everywhere. Not here, he thought as he plunged in a hole. He himself had picked up another spear and drove this one through a spearman's chest, before the man could plunge his spear in his war horse. He pulled out his sword while he and his retainers rode dozens of men against the ground. "Drive them into the river, men," he shouted at the top of his lungs as his men charged behind him, trampling the men he had pushed over. He saw how one of the few knights on horse charged at him. He wore armor with the sigil of House Banefort and wielded a morning star. He pulled on his reins to turn his horse and quickly rode towards the knight, scattering a group of archers belonging to the same house as the incoming noble. He deflected the attack from the morning star with his sword before cutting at the back of the man's horse. The horse shrieked and threw of his rider. The man tried to stand up as he shouted, "I surrender, sir. I surrender. I don't take prisoners today." He responded grimly, as he slashed the knight's neck open. He looked around and saw how a big part of the enemy force was being pushed into the river by his men. Another part, consisting of some 1,500 men, were running across the river. He wanted to pursue them, but he couldn't do that without risking the battle here. So, he cursed and turned his horse and charged a group of archers in the back. Half an hour later the slaughter was done. They had managed to kill or scatter 2/3 of the enemy force on the southern bank, but that damned Presley knight had managed to retreat the others. It didn't matter, the day was theirs. Sadly, there had been no more Lannisters in this camp, but he hoped the Banefort knight at least had some relation to them. He would not rest before he had the blood of the Kingslayer's kin on his sword. The man himself might be out of reach, his family wasn't, and he would take their lives away like that Lannister cunt had done to Ed. He gathered back his force and allowed them to loot the bodies and the camp. After, they would take care of their dead. They would join the army again before nightfall. Rob. They had destroyed the Lannister force. It was an amazing victory. He had killed men, Grey Wind even more. He thought it would help against the pain, but it didn't. The only one, who he knew, that understood him at this moment was Jon, because he felt exactly the same. He had gained a victory, saved a brother, an uncle and a grandfather, but the one who he had set out to save, he had lost. Father was dead. Beheaded by the Lannisters. It seems that with his last breath he had kept his honor and managed to bring down the Lannister legitimacy. They had gotten reports from people fleeing the city of how the city was on fire when they left. Nobles had either been driven in the Red Keep or the September of Baelor. The Gold Cloaks had lost control in complete districts of the city and chaos reigned supreme. Street fights between the city watch and the people or between groups of citizens amongst themselves were common occurrence the first 2 days after his father's death. They didn't have any news past that and hoped to get some soon. In the meantime, Tywin had retreated towards Harrenhal. His scouts told him they had forced marched south, losing hundreds of men on the march. His force now probably only numbered between 13 to 14,000 men and King's Landing was in flames. It seems the Lannisters were on the brink of losing, but he refused to underestimate Tywin Lannister. He would have a council later, after he had prayed. Some of his lords would want him to move on Harrenhal together with the foot under Lord Rickard. Theoretically he would well outnumber them. However, all wasn't as good as it seemed. Already reports were coming in that Tywin Lannister was forcibly raising the troops of the Northern Crown lands. Some reports even said he was scouring villages around Harrenhal and forcing the men into his service. There was also talk of sellswords coming over from Essos. No, this war wasn't over yet. He had managed to save big parts of the Riverlands, that was sure, but they hadn't won yet. First, he needed to pray. He hadn't seen a good weirwood tree since he had left Moat Cailin. All his northern lords, except for the Marndaelis, gathered around him and Jon with some of their kin. Together they marched to the Godswood. There they were joined by Lord Tytos Blackwood and his kin. Kneeling in silence in front of the slender weirwood he prayed for the safety of the remainder of his family. He also prayed for revenge. He would take Joffrey's head for this and make him, and his family, pay. He asked the gods for guidance how to proceed and to give him the strength to see this through. As he sat there, between Jon and the Great Jon and with the rest of the lords behind him, they were disturbed by people arriving on the scene. He felt annoyed at that, couldn't they give him peace at a moment as this? He turned his head around slightly to look who it was and saw 2 boys stand there looking out of breath. One had a canny resemblance to Lord Tytos, the other was Bran. His features immediately softened at the sight of his little brother. He waved him over and the boy ran to him. As he arrived, he sat up on his knee and grabbed his little brother in a silent hug. Soon Jon joined them and the 3 of them stood before the gods like that. He felt his brother's hot tears drop onto his tunic, but he didn't care. He looked up to his lords and saw how all looked onto them, none making a sound. Bran, there will be a lot of time for us to be together. However, the lords and I would like to pray after the battle. Would you like to join us or will I see you later? He said with a reassuring smile. His little brother looked at him and said, I want to stay with you and Jon. Can I stay? I want to pray for father. He looked at the tears in his brother's eyes and nodded. All 3 of them kneeled down in front of the weirwood tree and prayed. He prayed that they would see his father's bones soon so they could lay him in the crypt with his father and siblings. He prayed that his father would be proud of him and would give him, Jon, Bran and the rest of their family the strength to go on. All the while, his right hand never left his little brother's shoulder, showing him that he wasn't alone. 10 minutes later they all stood up again. Bran hugged him again and then Jon. Together they walked back into the Great Hall. Grandfather is waiting for you, Rob. He wishes to meet you again. He saw you when he was a babe here apparently. He is very sick, but he watched the battle from on top of the gate with me. He is very proud of you, he said. He smiled at his little brother then. Happy that he hadn't been alone when he had heard the news. He would see his grandfather, but not now. I first have to convey a war council with the lords tonight. Tomorrow I will go see grandfather. I will spend the whole day with you, I promise. He smiled. Bran obviously didn't like that, but he seemed to understand. He looked up at Jon and then back at him. Can Jon come with us, you know, with mother's family and stuff? Jon looked at him in hesitation, clearly not knowing what to say. He won't be able to join us when we first go to grandfather. The rest of the day we will all spend together though. Jon is our brother and one of my closest advisors besides. He will stay at my side and none of these riverlords have anything to say against it, not even House Tully. Now Bran did look happy, as Jon smiled too. I also have someone else that would really like to see you. Bran turned his head towards him. Who? He laughed at his brother. Well, the man has the audacity to call himself your favorite uncle, he said with a wink. His brother looked at him strangely for a second, before his whole face lit up. Really? Is Uncle Brynden with you? Where is he? He doesn't seem to have exaggerated, Jon said with a chuckle. He joined the army on the march here from the twins. It was Uncle Brynden that took down the northern camp by surprise, he responded. He already entered the castle with Uncle Edmure, who was freed. I don't know where they are now. I will go look for him then, while you have the war council, Bran said happily. He looked sternly at his brother. Bran, you know Uncle Brynden. Do you really think he will want to miss the council? No. His brother responded sadly. But maybe he will let me join by his side, he asked, a hesitant smile creeping up on his face. He let me join one before, you know. That took him by surprise. He looked at Jon, who had the same expression on his face. After a moment of silent conversation between Jon and him, the former shrugged. He clearly didn't mind too much. I will talk about it with Sir Brynden. If he thinks it is a good idea, you may join. However, you will sit with us. You are a Stark, the heir to Winterfell besides. Your place is with me and Jon, he said seriously. At this his brother's face fell, clearly thinking about father and only now realizing his position. Am I really the heir now? He asked timidly. Yes, Bran, you are. Until Aelys and I get a son, you are the next in line. If something were to happen to me in this war, Jon can lead the army. He won't be lord, however, you will. Do you understand? He said seriously. He hated that he needed to do this and explain this to his brother, but it was war and this needed to be said. His brother nodded sadly. I'll try to make sure nothing happens to our annoying brother, Bran. You know I'm better with a sword than he is, I'll keep him alive. Jon laughed and Bran sheepishly joined in. I'll have you prove that to me in the yard tomorrow, Snow. I won't get insulted without cause, he laughingly responded. It will be my pleasure, Stark, Jon replied with a mock bow. They all laughed then, as Bran took both of their hands as he walked between them. After a while, he asked him. That boy, who was with you, is that the Blackwood boy you talked about in your letters? Bran nodded. Alan Blackwood, Lord Tytos' fourth son. He is my best friend. You know the Blackwoods are actually distant cousins of us. We have a great-great-grandmother, called Melantha Blackwood. She was the wife of Lord William Stark and grandfather Rickard's grandmother. Maester Vimen told me all of this and showed me the family trees. Alan and Lord Tytos descend from Melantha's elder brother. His brother told them, clearly very excited about the prospect of being distant kin of his friend. The Blackwoods have always been a respectful family, especially for us in the north. They are one of the few southern houses to keep the old gods and some of the customs of the first men. They are good friends to have. It is also nice that there is a connection between you and Alan. He responded honestly and his brother seemed very glad about it. They silently walked further until they saw the Blackfish walking in the yard. Uncle! Bran shouted as he ran towards his hero. Sir Brynden saw him and smiled when the boy ran at him at full speed. When he got to him, the Blackfish picked him up and threw him high in the air. Bran's laugh could be heard over the entire courtyard. He set the boy down as they quickly started talking. He made his way over to his uncle, but he stopped halfway as he saw that Jon was hanging back. Come Jon. Are you sure? Your mother's family is? John asked, clearly unsure about it all. Yes, I am. You're our brother and one of my commanders. You have already seen each other, and you will see a lot more of one another in the future. Just come with me, he said seriously but gently. His brother nodded happily, and he saw some confidence coming back to his face. Together they walked to their little brother and his hero playing and chatting away in the middle of the yard. Uncle, he said respectfully when they came close. John, at the same time, said in his most respectful tone, Sir Brynden. Ah, Rob. Bran here tells me you wanted him to join the War Council, the Blackfish responded, as he nodded towards John. No, I didn't, he said, throwing a nasty look at Bran, who hid behind their uncle's right leg. I normally didn't want to, however, Bran said you have let him in on a War Council before. So, I wanted to ask you first before deciding. The grey-haired veteran frowned at that, as he looked at Bran. Well, for me it would be alright. I think he'd learn a lot and it do him and the North good to see their new lord and heir together in a meeting like this, but I don't like him lying to get his place there. Sorry, Bran said softly as he looked at his feet. Still getting used to the idea that he was now the Lord of Winterfell, he had a difficult time with thinking about his uncle's words. Finally, he nodded. Good, then it will be done as such. However, Bran must sit next to me as the heir to Winterfell. I hope you don't mind. Of course not, I totally understand. I will be sitting next to Edmure because Hoster can't be there. Sir Brynden responded. Very well, he agreed with his uncle. Come Bran, I'll first explain to you how it goes in private. War councils in the North are slightly different, he said as he looked down at his little brother. At this the eyes of his little brother went wide. He almost ran towards him, both excited and intrigued. As such they walked away, three brothers who weren't of age talking about state business and war councils. What had just happened? He kept thinking over and over and over again. He had sat at the council, with Bran and John at his sides, and it had gone as expected until the topic of which king to support came up. All he had done was speak up against Renly, as he clearly had no right with his older brother Stannis in the picture. Both had declared themselves king, after the scandal of the Lannister Queen's children came out because of his father. Renly had no right of it, and when Stannis was talked about, many of the lords didn't seem very enthusiastic. Limandiari, one of Bran's friends, even spoke up against it. The small boy sat there representing his house, as his father was locked in Castle Diari because of the Lannister presence. The Diaris, just like the Good Brooks, the Mutongs and the Rajahs, had chosen the side of the Targaryens in the rebellion. While most of those wounds had come to heal, all knew of how unforgiving Lord Stannis was. They feared further retribution for their houses, as seen in Sir Robin Rajah's support of the young Diari heir. Another one of Bran's friends, Miles Mouton, also supported him. The talks about Stannis having taken on a witch from Ass High didn't help either. The lords who believed in the Seven clearly didn't like this one bit. This destroyed his initial plan, as he had planned to call his banners for Stannis like his father. It was soon clear, however, that most of the Riverlords refused this idea, and even some of his own lords clearly weren't in favor. The discussion kept going, as he quietly listened to what everyone had to say. Until the Great Jon spoke up, of course. Next thing he knew, he was crowned king. He was crowned king. Harry, Lady Mage, Lord Galbart, all the northern lords had joined and crowned him king. Even Domeric Bolton and Roose Ryswell had done so, accounting to almost every big northern noble family. The only notable absentees being the Sawins, Hornwoods, Tall Hearts and some of the mountain clans. His father's friend Lord Meager and his son and his own friend Clee would follow, just like Lord Harley's Hornwood and Sir Helman Tallheart, who were at the twins. The clans would jump at the idea of a northern king, especially with his father's grandmother hailing from their ranks. So suddenly, he was officially the king of the whole north. It hadn't stopped there either, suddenly Lords Blackwood, Bracken and Mallister all kneeled too. The rest of the Riverlords joined as well, even his uncles in the end. Now he was king. King in the north and Trident, they were calling him. He didn't know what to do with it. The only thing he had wanted to come from the meeting was that they had decided they would once again send messages to his Aunt Lysa. The letters told her of the battles won. This might encourage her to join them, if not they would contact the lords directly with news of Robert Arryn's possible ancestry. Another big discussion had started on what to do with the Kingslayer. Some, like Harry and surprisingly Lady Mage, wanted him dead. They called upon themselves that Lord Ricard and Lord Harleys would demand it too after the loss of their sons. Other nobles, like Roose Riswell, whose brother was captured by Lord Tywine, or some of the Riverlords, were more cautious. Most were undecided, it seemed. He had decided to delay the matter. He had stated that he would only release the Kingslayer in exchange for independence, nothing less. This had at least pleased most of his vassals for now. If Lord Tywine would give them that and more, he was willing to negotiate. After deciding this, he had needed to get out. He had just stood up and left, leaving everything behind. He was only followed by 2 loyal guards from Winterfell and his faithful companion Grey Wind. He needed to think, and he needed to be alone to do so. They were clearly winning this war. They had destroyed one of the 2 armies and damaged the other. Due to death, capture or desertion, the Lannisters must have lost close to 20,000 troops. All the while he and his forces had lost but a fourth of that amount. The Riverlords had lost a lot more, due to his uncle's defeat and certain keeps and smaller forces being destroyed by the Lannisters, but even with those added the Lannisters had had it far worse. They also had captives. Tywine's own golden son, but also 2 of his sister's sons, Cleos and Shenfrey, and his brother's son Martin. Many other nobles and lords of the Westerlands were also in their custody. All the Lannisters had in comparison was some noble captives, most notably Ricard Riswell, some Freys, Lord Meager Sewin and Sir Donal Locke. He had over twice the amount of nobles they had. All in all, he was in the perfect position to negotiate from a winning position, but all he wanted for it was gone. He could have negotiated for his father, but his father was no more. What did he want? One side of him wanted to rip out the eyes of all the Lannisters as he burned their lands and tarnished their reputation. He wanted to put the heads of Tywine, Jaime, Cersei and all their bastard children on a pike, while he burned King's Landing to the ground. The other side of him just wanted to be done with this. Protect his people, now including those of the Riverlands, and bring them peace and stability while preparing them for winter. Both sides were constantly in conflict with each other, but now the first one took over and he decided to go visit the Kingslayer himself. He told his guards to go towards the tower cell. His faithful direwolf didn't need any instruction, he just darted off towards the tower. It was strange how they understood each other. Like no words were ever needed. The Tully guards outside the cell looked strangely at him, but none dared to refuse him entry. Probably on the basis that he looked a lot like old Lord Hoster Tully. He didn't think they would have heard about his kinship just yet, but you never knew. He walked up towards the cell and looked inside of the metal bars. There he saw him, the man that killed his friend and brother-in-law. The man that had maimed Osric for life. He was sitting on some dirty straw. His blonde locks were dirty and brown because of the travel and captivity to bring him here. The one thing that never changed was his cocky smile though. "Ah boy, have you finally come to see me?" the man laughed, but he didn't care. One of the Tully guards opened the cell on his orders, and he walked in with Grey Wind close behind. When seeing the wolf, the Kingslayer's confidence plummeted. He felt pleasure as he saw the man's smile finally disappear from his face, still he said nothing. He walked over to the man and saw that both his arms and legs were in chains. The chains were connected to the wall, only providing just the right mobility needed to move in the whole of the cell. The Kingslayer stood and he looked him in the eye until he finally saw his scar and smiled. His pretty face was forever tainted by a scar running across the whole of his cheek. Seeing his smile, the man's face turned angry. "A gift from your father," he said. "I gave him a much worse one. I don't think the man will ever walk again." "No, he won't," he said stoically. "Not because of you, mind you. Because of your bastard son." Joffrey took his head. He continued, anger slipping into his voice. At this the Kingslayer's green eyes closed to slits. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that my father is dead. Joffrey beheaded him, just after my father revealed the secret of his parentage. Your bastard was too late, however. The whole city rebelled against your son and sister. From the latest accounts we have, whole parts of the city are in open rebellion." He answered, closely watching the man's reaction. A mix of emotions shot through the man's eyes. Surprise, shock, anger, but also concern clearly visible. You and my father scarred each other, Kingslayer. Although none of the events leading up to the fight were fair, I suppose the fight itself was. You showed yourself to be the better sword. He said matter-of-factly. No point in denying it, he had seen the man fight in the Whispering Wood, he was a demon with a sword in his hand. What your son did wasn't remotely fair though. He took my father's head, just like that. No negotiations, no nothing. Now I ask myself, just like the fathers scarred each other, might the sons not get even too? Why not take your head and send it to him with a little message? A father for a father, something like that maybe, he continued, his voice completely devoid of any emotion, as he looked upon the man's neckline and thought how he would feel if he sliced ice through it. It would be kind of poetic, don't you think? Even ice would get its revenge, he said as he motioned towards the Valyrian steel sword strapped on his back. The Kingslayer's face turned whiter with every word he uttered. He saw how the man's eyes looked from him towards the pommel of the sword and back. Fear clearly visible in his eyes. I won't though, not yet at least. I'll give your father my terms when I see fit. If he accepts them, you might even survive. If he proves as dishonest as his grandson, twice over, well, lucky for him he has another son I suppose. He said, seeing the man gain some color again, before all of it left an instance. I will give you a reminder from me. Something to remember me by. Something for your sister to think of when she looks upon your face. Something to satisfy my vengeance for now. He continued grimly, as he slowly took out ice. He saw the fear in the men's eyes and before he could do anything, he was on his back with grey wind on top of his belly as he growled deeply. Now keep your head still, Kingslayer. Unless you want to lose your head, that is. Ice flew through the air and scratched along the Kingslayer's face. The man's short scream pierced the air. Yes, that will do. He said satisfied, as he looked upon the wound that he had given the man's cheek. It almost completely matched the one his father gave him. Now you will remember both father and son forever. He finished as he turned around and walked away. Have the maester come to take a look at him, I don't want him to die for now. He said to one of the stunned Tully guards. The man nodded fiercely and walked up to close the cell. Grey wind, to me. He said simply. The wolf growled heavily at the wounded man below him and bit down one time, less than an inch from the man's face. After that he stood up happily and joined him again. They walked away together, as he heard the cell close behind him. The next day. Bran. He was sitting in Rob's room with both of his elder brothers. Rob had asked for their breakfast to be brought up to his room so they could enjoy the morning with the three of them. It had been the best morning in a long time for him. Rob and John told him many stories of their adventure south so far and he told them about his time in Riverrun. His eldest brother had even ordered food to be brought up for their wolves, who were all playing in front of the fire. Apparently Rob had had him betrothed, while he was married already. He had married under the weirwood in Moat Cailin. Mother, John, Sansa and baby Rickon had been there. The only absentees were Arya, who was assigned to the role of the Stark in Winterfell, himself, who was in Riverrun and father, who had died now. Thinking about father made him sad again and soon his brothers noticed, and they asked him what was wrong. I was thinking about father. He responded softly. He saw the same hurt he felt flash over both their faces and for a moment they were all silent. Finally, John spoke up. How did you hear Bran? The Lannisters told us, they shouted it in front of the walls to demoralize it. They even let a raven from King's Landing through. After I heard the news, I went to Grandfather Hoster. He was weak and very sleepy, but we talked a little and he made me feel better. I don't know how but I had felt it coming. I had had a dream about father's death some days before and Summer had howled loudly that night as if he had lost someone. He explained sadly. He saw how both his brothers looked at each other for a while before Rob looked at him strangely. I had the same dream. His brother said with a weird look on his face, and so did John. He now looked to John, who nodded, and then back to Rob. What does this mean? He asked them. I don't know. John replied. Grey wind also howled that night. Ghost was silent as ever, but he seemed very restless and stood watchful next to Grey as he howled. So, the wolves knew. And we did too, because of the same dream, he asked them. It seems so, Rob said. They all looked at each other weirdly. After a long moment of silence, he asked, have any of you had other weird dreams? As he said it, he looked at Summer. What do you mean with weird dreams? Rob asked suspiciously. He wanted to take it all back and laugh it off, but something in Rob's face stopped him from doing so. He looked at John and he also looked uncomfortable. They were his brothers, he could tell them this, right? Well, sometimes I dream that I'm a wolf, not just a wolf. I dream that I'm Summer. I can see Riverrun's small godswood or the inside of the keep. One time I even saw myself sleep, I think. It shocked me so badly that I woke up, and when I looked around the room, I saw Summer sitting there and looking at me. He admitted. At this both his brothers looked shocked. Rob wanted to say something, that was clear, but he held back. Suddenly John said, I've been dreaming I'm a wolf too. I don't know if it's ghost, but my paws were white and I was running through woods and streams. One night I heard sounds like an army that was passing. I didn't know what it meant. Now both he and Rob looked shocked at John. It was clear to him that he was dreaming he was ghost, like he did with Summer. He quickly turned to Rob. So, do you dream of Grey too? His brother looked shocked and a little scared at the question. John nudged him on and finally he responded. I have dreamt that I was running in the woods as a wolf too. I once dreamt of a hunt and the wolf I was caught a deer and ate it. When I woke up, I just went on with my day as normal, but just as I was about to leave my tent, Grey entered. His mouth was covered in blood from a recent kill. I don't know, it still freaks me out until this day. He was getting excited at this. He and his brothers were all dreaming of their wolves. Did you have any more dreams after that? He asked quickly. Yes, but just normal ones like running around through forests and valleys. His brother responded. This is amazing. We all dream of them, he said as he looked at their wolves. All his brothers followed suit and looked at their companions in front of the fire. Suddenly they all turned and looked back at them. Summer looked deeply into his eyes and somehow he thought the wolf knew what they were talking about, like if they felt it too when they ran together. Suddenly Rob exclaimed. Does Grey also look weirdly to you, as if he understands? No, John exclaimed, and he heard Rob sigh next to him. But Ghost does, looks like he is saying that he was there too or something. Now he and Rob looked at John. Like what? Rob exclaimed loudly. Like, I don't know, like he was telling me I remember our runs too or something. John said, and Rob looked at him with his mouth wide open. Summer did the same to me. It looked like he said to me that he remembered that night looking at each other. Now both his brothers abruptly turned their hands towards him. What does this mean? Rob asked. Well, the only thing I can think of are wargs and skin changers. You remember them, right, from old Nan's tales? John asked. Both he and Rob nodded. Aren't skin changers the bad guys in every story? Rob finally asked. Now he and John looked sad at each other. He looked again to Summer. That can't be, Summer can't be bad, he shouted. I agree with Bran, Ghost would never hurt someone if I didn't want him to do so. John said, calmer than he expected. Okay, well, I think it's best we keep this to ourselves for now. I don't think the others will understand. Rob said diplomatically. Agreed, said John. However, we need to tell each other of every dream now. Together we can figure this out. They all nodded. Wait, would Sansa and Arya have the same dreams about their wolves? Baby Rickon maybe too, he asked. At this his brothers looked stunned. Maybe. Rob answered. If you see how Arya is around that wolf, I wouldn't be surprised. Shaggydog also follows around Rickon like his shadow, and when Rickon cries he always becomes unruly. Yes, John responded. And Lady behaves just like Sansa does. She is always the best-mannered wolf of the litter. Nymeria never listens and Lady always does, just like Arya and Sansa. His brother whispered the last parts. Can we ask them? He said aloud. You can, soon. Rob responded, suddenly his lord's voice coming back. What did you mean? He asked. Bran, you are my heir now, the crown prince of the north and the Riverlands. Riverrun is no safe place for you now. I will be sending you home with an escort. You will go back to Winterfell to be with the rest of the pack. Robb responded seriously. What? You are sending me away now, he shouted. Not immediately, no. Jon and I want to spend time with you, but in a week or two you should leave for Winterfell. Robb said, more compassionately this time. But where would you two go? And what about Sir Brynden and Alyn and my other friends? What about my fostering with House Tully? He exclaimed quickly, one after the other. Now Jon spoke up. Robb, your uncle and I will need to fight this war. After that we will come back with you. Yes, Robb added. We will come home after ending the Lannisters. You can even go back here when the war is over. I'm the king now, I can send you wherever I please, even if mother disagrees. He looked shocked at his brother. You can, can't you? You can order mother now. Yes, his brother sighed. I can. I won't if I don't need to do though. I also promise you that I will send you back here when the war is over. He nodded at that, still stunned. He also liked the idea of seeing mother and his sisters again. He even missed baby Rickon and he knew Summer missed his other siblings too. Okay, but what about Alyn and my other friends? He asked, not wanting to leave them behind. I'm sure I can arrange with Lord Hoster and Lord Tytos for Alyn to be fostered in Winterfell with you, until the time arrives to come back. I'm not so sure about the others. Daery is the heir to his father and the man is entrenched against the Lannisters. The same for House Mouton, Maidenpool is under threat now. I can't really ask their fathers for their permission, but I will look into it. Maybe they can come up later when we have freed their lands from the immediate threats. Okay, thank you Robb. He said, glad that Alyn would join him. Besides, Robb was king now, he could find a way to send Lymand and Miles up too. At that moment a knock was heard on the door. Robb frowned. I demanded to not be disturbed, he muttered. Who is it? He calmly but loudly asked. Harry on Carstark, Lord, your grace, he wishes to speak to you immediately. His guard called out. Harry, he heard his brother whisper, before calling out. Let him in. Harry walked in, he remembered him well from Winterfell, but his beard and hair were longer now. He looked more like his father now, a true wild and dangerous man of the north. Your grace, my prince, Jon. The man said respectfully as he nodded to all three of them. Take a seat, Harry. Have you broken your fast yet? Robb asked. The man sat down in front of him and responded. Yes, thanks Robb. Harry here is family too now, Bran. With me marrying Alis and things. Robb said to him and he nodded to his elder brother. Why have you come, Harry? His brother asked. Well, I heard you visited the Kingslayer yesterday. Yes, I did. Robb said. Not betraying anything. He felt curious about this. He hadn't heard anything from Robb about the Kingslayer after his capture. Heard you cut the man, although he still lives, the older man asked. Yes, I gave him a scar with ice, identical to the one my father gave him. I wanted to take his head like his bastard son took my father's. A father for a father kind of thing. I couldn't do it, I still need him. He might convince Tywin to accept independence. His brother said and Jon hissed at him. Robb, Bran is here. Please keep it civil. Robb looked at him then. It is winter now, Jon. The wolves need to wake up. The time to be a child is over, even for Bran. Jon nodded at him sadly as he went over to him and gave him a hug. His brother looked into his eyes and when he nodded that he was fine, Robb continued to Harry on. What about it, Harry? If you decide to kill him, I want to do it. Same for any other Lannisters or their kin. For Ed and Os, I must do it. The Karstarks deserve their revenge. Harry said grimly. Robb looked at the bearded man for a long time, before finally responding. If I promise you this, with the exception of Lord Tywin, Cersei and her bastards who are mine, will you accept my command that they are not to be touched for now? The two men looked each other in the eye then. I was the only thing the Karstark heir said after a while. Good, then I promise you so. If the negotiations fail and I order retribution, you will be able to do it. Rob said grimly. The other man looked at him before he put a hand on Rob's shoulder. Thank you, Rob. You know the North remembers. We need our revenge. My father, To and I want to repay the Lannisters tenfold. Will you allow us? I do. Rob said seriously. If peace isn't possible, you will be able to pay them in blood tenfold. If peace is achieved, they will pay you in other means. Cattle, gold, hostages. They will remember the Karstark name regardless. Harry looked at Rob then. I would prefer blood, but I will accept the rest if it frees the North from the shackles of the South. He then stood up and left. Rob and Jon looked towards each other then. Somehow, he felt that the war wasn't over yet for his brothers. Chapter 23, The Pack. 299 AC. Rob. He was looking over the maps with his commanders again. Their plan was clear. He had sent a peace offer with Cleo's free to Tywine. In the meantime he would go west. He would give the Lannisters a piece of their own medicine and go capture their keeps, steal their livestock and destroy their fields. It was said that another force was amassing itself in the Westerlands and they couldn't allow themselves to be pincered like that, so they would deal with it. Besides that, Tywine seemed to have split of around 1,000 of his loyal men to force the Crownlanders between Duskendale and King's Landing under arms. With his force even weaker, he doubted they would move on him any time soon. The split of force seemed to have been able to levi until it became a force of 3,000 to 4,000. Now it was apparently marching on King's Landing to finally bring order to the city. It seemed that around half of the city was still in rebel hands after weeks of fighting, and a lot of the communication of the enemy seemed to be disturbed. Another thing to lighten the mood was that reports told that a Lannister had died in the battles in the streets of King's Landing. His scouts didn't know which one, but a big funeral had been held, so it would have to have been some close relative of Cersei. Maybe Tyrion the dwarf. Or someone else. That damned family was too big. They went over the details of the campaign once more and everyone was in agreement. The spirits in his army were high, although some like the Umbers and Karstarks were getting restless in Riverrun. They had been here for weeks now, and sitting and waiting was also getting on his own nerves. He would react quickly. Already he was drawing out his supply lines for when he went west. Nothing would stop them if they finally made their move. Suddenly Maester Vireman entered the hall. Your Grace, a raven has arrived for you from Winterfell. It bears the Queen's personal seal. At this, he smiled. He couldn't wait to hear back from Aelys. He planned to leave it until his lords had left, as to not take extra time from them. That plan didn't work, however, as Harry shouted. Come on, Rob, don't keep my sister waiting. This was met by both assent and laughter from his lords. He looked at Harry and shook his head, but he still opened the letter. Dear Rob. I miss you here in the north. I am finally getting used to Winterfell and all the people are still very nice to me. Your family seems to like me. I spent a lot of time sewing with Sansa or playing with Arya or Rickon, and they seem to look at me as one of their own. Even their wolves come to play with me now, almost like Grey used to do in those blissful days at Moat Cailin. I sent this letter because I have joyous news. News that might better our spirits after all we've lost already. Yesterday morning I found out that I was pregnant. The Maester says that I'm in perfect health and over 2 months gone now. Everything seems fine. I feel a little sick in the mornings, but other than that there is nothing of note just yet. Some of the servants tell me it is a sign of the gods that they bless our marriage so early. Your mother just states that you are like your father in this regard. Your mother is overjoyed with the news. She has had a very difficult time after what happened to your father, but this news seems to bring her some new life. I hope it can do the same to you. Avenge your father and Ed and then come home safe to me, my love. Hopefully the baby and I will be waiting for you when you do. I love you with all my heart. Aelys. He looked at the letter in astonishment. He read it again and didn't know what to think. I am going to be a father. Kept ringing in his head. This can't be real. It can't be, can it? He put his hand on the council table to stabilize himself as everything started turning. Rob, is everything okay? Jon asked, always loyally standing by his side. I don't know. He whispered and he gave his brother the letter. By now all the lords had noticed his behavior. Harry shouted out, "What is it, Rob? Has something happened to my sister?" When he didn't immediately respond, the man walked over to him with quick steps and asked him again. He just waved to John to give him the letter. John did so, the smile on John's face clearly reassuring Harry. Harry read the letter intently and the smile that crept on his face grew bigger and bigger. When he finished the letter, he looked towards all the lords who were awaiting some information. "It seems our king is going to be a father, and John and I are to become uncles." Harry boomed, happier than he had seen him in months. The sounds from his lords were deafening. All of them shouted in support of the news and all came up to congratulate him. Some said encouraging things, others just showed their happiness at the possibility of a Stark heir or praised Alis. His uncles congratulated him both, all promising to send a letter to his mother in Winterfell. After a while, they left the council room to give him a moment to gather his thoughts. Only Harry and John remained, while someone was sent to get To and Os here. "It seems my father's plot to unite the North with your marriage worked even better than expected." Harry beamed as he slapped his shoulder. "I'm happy for you and Alis, Rob. The gods know our families can use some happiness right now." He looked into his brother-in-law's eyes and nodded. Then John came to him. "Congratulations Stark, another pup for the litter. Father would be proud." He looked into his brother's eyes then, the typical grey Stark eyes of his father, and without a word he hugged his brother. "I wish he could be here to know it and see his grandchild one day," he said sadly. "I know, but he is with the gods now. If there is a possibility to see it from there, be sure that he is proud. He always approved of Alis, you know that." His brother felt and the pain slowly dulled his heart, although it never left. He turned back to Harry who looked compassionately at him. When they saw that he was getting it together again they smiled. "This calls for a toast," he said, as he sent a servant to bring some northern ale for them. Northern ale had become sparse here, after their march and stay in Riverrun. However, they all agreed this was an occasion where they could empty the storage. They then talked about Alis and growing up in Winterfell. Harry, joyful with every word, suddenly asked, "Will the child have a wolf, like you do?" He looked into his eyes. "I don't know. If there are pups, then most definitely. However, for the moment there are none. This could change in the future, but I wouldn't know how." The Karstark heir nodded at that. "Just asking, I was thinking of helping my nephew or niece Piggy write one of those monsters." It was an entertaining thought. He looked at his brother-in-law in shock. "You want to do what with my unborn child?" he exclaimed. Ignoring him, Harry continued. "Maybe I could just convince Grey here to do it. What do you think, boy?" he said as he looked towards the wolf. The wolf looked at Harry and turned his head slightly, before doing something that looked suspiciously like shrugging, and the Karstark's laughter boomed through the room. "That's settled then, boy," he shouted, as he threw Grey a bone that had remained from their meal. "What's so funny here?" To asked as he entered the room, followed by Os. "Sit down, the both of you. We have amazing news to share," Harry called out. They sat down suspiciously and were given a tankard of ale. "Well, the news is bloody good already, brother. It's been way too long since I have gotten some good ale. I really missed this stuff." "Wait until you hear this, To," Harry said to his brother, as he turned towards him as to say, "Come on, tell them." To and Os looked at him. "We just got a letter from your sister, To. Alis is pregnant." Both of them looked at him in shock before a huge smile spread on their faces. The both of them stood up and went to embrace him. "Congratulations, Rob. I am happy for the both of you and can't wait to meet the little wolf," Os said smilingly. His hug was a bit awkward as he clearly didn't know what to do with the stump on his left arm, but still kind all the same. "Yeah, me neither," Torrhen said. "Although I do hope he has Alis hair, the world is too small for another Redstock." The whole room laughed at that. "Thank you for that, To," he smiled, as he looked upon his best friend. "Now, I know again why I was thinking of keeping you away from the baby as best as I can. Now the room laughed even louder, as they turned on To. Ha ha, as if that'll work, Rob. As if. He smiled and then they sat back down. The rest of the day was spent with telling stories of their youth in Carhold, while he and John also told about Winterfell. His brother even told of some of his adventures in Bravos and Pentos and vowed to take his unborn child traveling when he or she was old enough. Then came the question of what it would be. "What do you think, Rob?" Harry asked. "Is it going to be a boy or a girl?" "I don't know, Harry. I don't care for now, I just want Alice and the babe to be healthy when I return," he said honestly. At this all men nodded, until To said, "It's still going to be a boy. Your father got 3 sons and our father as well. Uncle Arnulf got 6 grandsons and no granddaughters. It's in the blood. You'll have a lot of sons too." At this all the Karstarks hummed their approval. "A strong northern boy who will lead the north one day," Os said approvingly. "No," John said. "I think it's going to be a girl. A little she-wolf like Arya or Aunt Lyanna. A girl that will turn Rob's hairs grey before he's 30. One that he will find in the stables or the practice yard when she ran away from her sewing lessons," he said with a booming smile, and all the Karstarks started crying from laughter. I'll take that. If only to see the look upon Alice's face when she has to deal with the little one," Harry said. "Forget Alice, think about Rob's mother. She will pull her hair out if her lovely precious princess of a granddaughter is running around with stable boys and refuses to make dresses." To exclaimed loudly as he wiped the laughing tears from his face. Now everybody laughed again, John hardest of all. He had to laugh too. He loved his mother with all his heart, but the idea of her running after another girl like Arya was too much for him. Imagine the both of them doing mischief together. A 15-year-old Arya learning a 5-year-old copy of herself how to fight with swords and chat up the cooks, so she gets sweets. John said, and all laughed once more. Now imagine Lady Catelyn running after the both of them. I can see Arya skip her own wedding to play with swords with her niece or nephew. Osric laughed, and the thought broke every restraint he still had as the tears came to his eyes. "That won't be anything compared to her reaction when I proposed to take her on a sailing trip," John said. "Your mother might explode that instance." He jovially laughed. All knew of his mother's dislike for John, but if he could laugh with it himself then so could they. "I can see her sending ravens to White Harbor to try to stop you from leaving and have you arrested for kidnapping." He winked to his brother. "Good luck, that'll do her. Sir Wendell will probably join the both of us as he speeches about the honor of having a Stark princess on his boat." John laughed, and all joined in for another round of laughing as they all thought about the loyal Sir Wendell and his mother. "I still think it'll be a boy," Harry said. "He can foster at Carhold with me when the time comes. I'll make a man out of him. In Winterfell with you and Alice he will become soft." The eldest one at the table laughed. "I think you have forgotten the marriage contract, Harry. It clearly stipulates that your son will come to Winterfell, not the other way around. The only one that I'll make soft is your son, just to spite you." At this To and Os burst out laughing, as To spit his ale all over the table. "You wouldn't dare," Harry said as he squinched his eyes. "Watch me, Karstark. You better call your first son Rob, or I'll make a septon out of the boy." He laughed at his eldest brother-in-law. Now To and Os fell from the table out of laughing. A septon, ha ha. Harry's there as a southern pony. Wanting to become a septon, I can't, ha ha. They heard from under the table. "That's more than enough ale for you, To. You can't even stand anymore," Harry said, trying to get back at his younger brother. "I'll have to drink a lot more, if I were to wash away the family shame of your son being made a septon." To laughed as he sat back at the table. Now everybody joined in again, even Harry laughed it off. Like that the day continued, until the last sunshine was gone. At night he stumbled away, almost being carried by John and supported by Grey Wind. They had drunken the whole keg of ale with the 5 of them and he could barely stand anymore. It was one of the best days in his life so far. Arya. She had been good for weeks now. She did well in her lessons and didn't skip any. She didn't get into any major trouble, only small bouts that were easily fixed. She did everything perfect and, to be honest, she didn't mind as much as long as she was with Jonelle and her friends. Now however, she wouldn't listen. Bran had been sighted in Castle Sewin last night and she would be damned if she was forced to wait here in the yard for him. She would behave like a good little lady when it was needed, but she wouldn't put on the act for her little brother who she had missed dearly. Bran didn't want her as a lady. Until he left, they played with swords together, rolled through the mud in their fine clothes or climbed trees. He would want her for who she was, not how she behaved, and she wouldn't wait here passively. So at first light, she and her friends snuck out their rooms and snuck to the stables. Nymeria helped them out a lot, as she was using her superior hearing to detect guards. At the stables they quickly saddled their horses. She had seen how a young guard had been opening the front gate when they snuck towards the stables. That meant they would be able to ride through it quickly. She got on top of her horse and waited until her three friends had done the same. She looked at her three friends and all nodded silently at her. "You ready, NYM?" She could have sworn the wolf nodded at her. She shrugged and stared at the end of the stables. "Here," she finally screamed as she forced her heels in her mare's flank. She tried to raise her horse to full speed almost immediately. Normally that would be a very bad idea, but her mare was used to her antics and so she obeyed quickly. She raced outside of the stables and turned towards the gates. In doing so, she ran two stable boys to the ground. She turned in the saddle and saw that they were all right. She let out a sigh and looked to the front once more. She was nearing the gates and the two guards had started to notice her. One lowered his spear at her, while the other tried to stop him. The latter screamed at his companion to hold back his spear for Princess Arya. Gods, she hated that name, even more than the Lady One. Now for once, she was glad the man recognized her as such. She wouldn't want her horse to die or have Nymeria do something to the guard. The man threw down his spear at the last moment and she raced past the man from the right, as a growling Nymeria raced past his left. Her friends followed some ways behind her. "Get the captain or Sir Roderick here, now!" The young guard screamed at his colleague. "Ready the horses and the men, we need to follow them!" The other shouted to the quickly awakening castle. It all didn't matter as she was out of the gates already. She rode on quickly and only slowed down to let her friends catch up with her. Together they rode south as fast as they dared without expending their horses. They had packed water and fodder to feed them and had made sure they had been rested the past few days. Her plan to sneak out had gone perfectly as planned. They rode on the King's Road for a while. They passed several small folk from the surrounding villages on their way to Wintertown. Most recognized her through Nymeria and she tried to be as respectful to them as she could without slowing down. She only slowed down once, as she saw how an elder man's cart had been stuck in the muddy snow next to the road. She stopped and quickly ordered Nymeria to round the cart out of the mud. Her direwolf did it effortless. As the man was thanking her profusely, she departed while calling back that she was in a hurry. She silently thanked her father for repairing the King's Road so thoroughly, otherwise she would have needed to stop a lot more after yesterday's snowfall. They started to pass merchants and patrols wearing Stark livery. The further they got away from Winterfell, the more different colors were seen. Merchants from all across the north traveling to the Wintertown. Most let them pass but one or two tried to stop them. Nymeria quickly got them out of the way, however. As they rode and no one in sight was following them, they started laughing amongst themselves. Lyanna told her stories about how she used to go on rides or hunts with her mother and sister in Bear Island. Alara told her she did the same with her brothers and father from Last Hearth to Queen's Crown. Wyler told them sadly that she was never allowed to race through the streets of White Harbor, although she snuck out to do it once. Leaving the city was impossible as it was well guarded, and her father and grandfather had given clear instructions to bring her back to the keep if she wanted to get out without a letter from them. Because of that, she seemed to enjoy this trip all the more. After an hour and a half, they saw the dust from a group of riders behind them in the distance and so they sped up again. They asked a lot of their horses, but they managed to hold on. As the dust got farther and farther away, they relaxed once more but kept going. They traveled for another hour until they finally saw a group of men about a mile in front of them. Around 30 guards walked in 2 columns behind 3 riders. A wolf walked next to the small rider in the middle and she became overjoyed. That's Bran. There, in the middle, that's Bran with Summer. She called out to her friends. Nymeria also became excited, as she recognized her little brother. She howled out and they quickly heard Summer return the call and both wolves started to run towards each other at a terrifying speed. Without saying a word, she followed suit and raced behind Nymeria with her friends hot on her heels. In front of her, she saw the wolves crash into each other in a mighty clash and they started rolling around with each other. Playful sounds were coming from the both of them. She looked fondly at them as she passed but didn't stop. She had her own brother to greet after all. She saw how Bran wanted to race towards her too, but he was stopped by the man next to him. She then saw how the third rider was a boy too and wondered who he was. Didn't matter though, as she came to the group. She jumped out of the saddle before her mare had completely come to a halt and raced towards her little brother who had dismounted as well, albeit a lot more orderly. She grabbed him in a hug as she called out, "Bran, it's so good to see you. We were all so worried about you." She saw how a huge smile had set itself on her brother's face as he replied. "I missed you too, Arya. I'm all right. I saw 2 battles from atop the gates of Riverrun, but I was never in any kind of danger." 2 battles? You have to tell me everything about them. How are Jon and Robb? And grandfather and our uncles? Is Uncle Edmure still such a prick? Is Robb really winning the war against Tywin Lannister? She fired off in quick succession and her brother started laughing at her. Robb and Jon are well. Grandfather is really ill though. Our uncles are just like we remember, although Edmure has changed somewhat for the better after his loss at Riverrun. Yes, Robb is winning but the war isn't over yet. It could still change. I'll tell you all about it later," he said, as he hugged her once more. "Now where are Mother, Sansa and baby Rickon? I thought you and your friends would have raced in front of them, but I can't see them anywhere." "They aren't even in the distance where you were yet," her brother asked as he looked towards the horizon. She suddenly felt guilty. She had been so focused on seeing Bran that she forgot how he would like to see all of them. She looked down to the ground sheepishly. "They are still at Winterfell. We kind of snuck out to greet you." Her brother looked at her for a while before laughing hard and hugging her a third time. "I hoped that you wouldn't have changed. I can't wait to show you all the fighting moves I learned in the Riverlands from Uncle Brynden." She beamed at that, knowing that her brother would like her for who she was. Their wholesome moment was ruined however, by the man next to Bran. "Princess Arya Stark, are you telling me you ran from Winterfell and rode close to 4 hours here without the permission of Lady Catelyn? Your mother must be worried sick. What if something happened to you on the road?" The man said, and she fondly recognized him as Horlis Mollin. "Good to see you too, Horlis," she exclaimed, as she laughed at the man. At this, her brother and all her friends joined in laughter. The boy next to Bran joined in too. 4 hours, Fee. We did it in less than 3. She boasted proudly. "Besides, do you really think anyone would hurt us as long as she is here with us?" she asked, as she pointed to Nymeria who was still rolling around and nipping at Summer. Horlis had a thoughtful look on his face. "No, I suppose not. I saw your brother's wolves kill men at the Whispering Wood and the Battle of the Camps. I will never forget how vicious those beasts can be if they want to. Still, your mother will be worried all the same." "What? Grey and Ghost killed people? How?" she shouted in surprise. "Tore them limb from limb or bit out their throats, a gruesome sight for friend and foe alike. Although they never even growled at me. It seems they only show their vicious side towards the Lannisters," Horlis said, a dreadful look on his face. "Good. They deserve nothing less for what they did to father," she responded darkly. "Agreed, young princess. Now tell me, would you and your companions like to rest? I can hold the soldiers here. They will be thankful for the stop. You will be able to talk with Prince Brandon then, and it might give your pursuers a means to catch up to us so they can stop worrying," Horlis said with a smile, and both she and Bran agreed easily. "How do you know I am being pursued?" she asked, surprised after realizing his last words. "Well, I've worked for your family for 12 years, princess. I know your mother and Sir Roderick. If they don't search half of the north for you, then no one will," Horlis responded, a smile on his face. She nodded and turned back to her brother. You remember the girls? She said, as she waved her friends over. Her little brother said. Good to see you again, Alera, Lionel, Wyler. May I present you my friend? This is Alan Blackwood, a son of Lord Titus Blackwood of Raventree Hall. You brought another southerner north. It's getting crowded already with those annoying Freys here, she said as she suspiciously looked at the boy. The Blackwoods are half northerners, her brother replied. He and his family pray to the old gods and keep some of the customs of the first men, just like us. They are also distant kin. Grandfather Ricard's grandmother was Melantha Blackwood. She was married to Lord William Stark. She looked at him weirdly, trying to remember something about her ancestor William. The one whose son old Nan came to Winterfell for. Her brother exclaimed. Oh, that one. She responded understandingly. Wasn't he the one that died fighting Raymond Redbeard the Wilderling King? Yes, Alara Umber joined in. He and my great-great-grandfather Lord Harmond Umber defeated the Wilderling force, but he died. His brother Artos Stark revenged him and killed the Wilderling. Harmond the drunken giant they called my ancestor. My father looks up to him greatly. They both nodded at that, remembering the story. So, you're some distant kin to us? She asked the boy. He nodded. I suppose, but just call me Alan. I wasn't going to call you cousin or something, if that's what you think. She replied smugly, and the boy laughed. Let's sit down and talk, we have a lot of tales to tell you, Bran said happily. They sat down and he told us about the battles he had seen and how their families were doing. It seemed the boy Alan's father had fought at the lost Battle of Riverrun and he had managed to save the castle. He had later sallied out to help Robb win, so these Blackwoods might not be too bad. Definitely better than those Weasley Freys. She was still angry with Robb about betrothing Bran to such a family. She wouldn't say it aloud anymore though, as her mother had told her that if it weren't for Bran it would have been Sansa or her that would have been betrothed. Just imagine being forced to marry a slimy git like little Walder. When he had just started talking about his fostering before that, a group of armed men came over the hill. Horlis Mollin pushed them back and walked up to them as they came closer, flanked by both Summer and Nymeria. The guards jumped up and grabbed their weapons but soon the stark colors on the approaching riders' liveries were visible. She and Bran looked at the men coming in, concentrating on their wolves who walked in front of them. Soon they heard Horlis say. Good day, Sir Roderick. I heard you might be looking for a missing princess. You heard right, Horlis. The man said, relief clearly audible in his voice. Still he looked at her fiercely, but she looked him defiantly in the eyes. Well, as you can see, I have both the princess and her brother Prince Brandon here. I suggest you and your man take something to eat and we get on our way so we can make it back before sunset. What do you think? Horlis said. It seemed his position as captain of the guards had severely boosted his confidence. We'll do that, Sir Roderick said as he descended from his horse. The dozen men behind him did the same. It's good to see you, Bran, the man said happily as he walked over to her brother and her. You too, Sir Roderick. I'm sorry about Jory, her brother responded sadly. Aye lad, so am I. About your father as well, both should have never happened but you're almost home now. That's the most important. Jory left me with 3 small castles to worry about and he saved the family name in doing so I'll forever be grateful for him for that. All thanks to your father, that is. He would have never been able to land a girl like Jonelle without him. The man smiled sadly. It's also good to see you, princess. I'll take a good look, as I think we won't be seeing so much of each other in the next coming weeks. I heard Jonelle scream she would have you and your friends work in the kitchens for the next months, all due to your insolence. Serves you right, your mother is scared to death and my men here are exhausted chasing you. She swallowed, as she thought of scrubbing pots. After that she looked apologetically to the men in Sir Roderick's company as they were quickly helped to some dried meats and watered ale. I know, she said, but I couldn't wait to see Bran. I've missed him. HMMPH, we all did. You could have just waited for a few hours like your sister, Sir Roderick said. Bran laughed at that. Sir Roderick, I know I've been away a while, but even I know there was no way Arya Underfoot was going to wait for me in the courtyard wearing a pretty dress like Sansa will later on. That's not who she is. She beamed at that, thanking the gods once more for bringing her little brother home. Sir Roderick had to laugh at Bran's words. Aye lad, you're right. Doesn't matter anymore now, you're all safe, that's what counts. He responded with a smile still on his face. Now let us depart, your mother will call for my head if I don't return Arya before nightfall. He laughed as he walked back to his horse. Bran. They arrived in the courtyard just as the sun was starting to set. His mother stood there, with Sansa next to her. He was shocked how much they looked alike now. Next to Sansa, while holding her hand, stood baby Rickon. Shaggy proudly beside him, with Lady a little in front of him. It looked like she was trying to keep a hold of him, like Sansa was doing with Rickon, and it made him smile. He jumped off his horse and ran towards his mother and hugged her. As he felt those auburn curls rest on his head while she cradled the back of it with her left hand, he felt home and safe for the first time since he had heard about father. He still had his mother, and oh had he missed her. As he cuddled mother, Sansa joined in as baby Rickon walked over to Arya. After a while they broke apart and he walked over to Rickon. Hey, remember me? He asked joyfully. His little brother looked at him strangely, but when he saw Shaggy Dog play with Summer he said. Shaggy remembers Summer. Do you are the one that was always with me when Nan told stories? He nodded. Yes, that's me. I've been away for a while, with mother's family, but now I'm back home. His brother looked at him strangely once more before saying, I remembered I leave. You left with that weird uncle and with father. Are they with you? I missed father, when is he coming back? He looked sadly at Rickon, as he answered. Our uncle is with Rob, he is helping him fight. At this, his brother nodded. And Farah? He held in the tears in his own eyes as he sat down on his knee to come to a height with his brother. Father isn't coming back. He died, little brother. We are here, mother and all your siblings. Now Rickon looked sad. He looked at the ground before looking back at him. Will Rob, John and weird uncle die and not come back too? The little boy asked sadly. No, they will come back for sure. He said as he hugged his brother. It might take a while though, they need to fight a lot of bad men before they can come home. At this his brother nodded and looked a little happier. Now that I'm home, we can play again with Shaggy and Summer like we used to. They are both bigger than ever, so it will be even more fun. You like that? He asked his brother, as he tried to cheer him while holding his own tears about father in. His brother nodded heavily and happily exclaimed. Shaggy will like that, and ran over to the wolves as he started to roll around with them. Rickon Stark, watch your clothes. His mother shouted, and he laughed. It's good to be home. He saw another woman standing to the side then and remembered her as Alis Stark. Well, Alis Stark now, he guessed. He walked over to her. Nice to finally see you after the marriage, Alis. I was sad to hear that I missed it. I've heard a lot about you from Rob and have a ton of long letters with me. Rob said he wrote everything that he couldn't send by Raven for you. She brightened up immediately at the mention of Rob. Thank you, Brandon. I was sad you couldn't be at the wedding either, but you are here now, that's the most important thing. She said sweetly. For family, it's Bran. He smiled at her and she smiled back. Bran, it is. Yesterday in Castle Sawin I heard that you are pregnant. Is that right? He asked her. Yes. She replied as she blushed lightly. Good, I hope it's a boy. Then everyone can stop talking to me about this nonsense and Summer and I can have fun again. I want to be a knight, not the Lord of Winterfell. That was always Rob's job, not mine. He exclaimed relieved. Alis laughed. I hope so too, but it might still be a girl. She responded. You will be here a while longer then. He sighed. Oh, well. I guess Sansa and Mother will love a girl. John will too, so it doesn't really matter. He shrugged. As long as you get a boy later when you're older. I still want to become a knight. He said seriously, and she laughed once more. I will try. She said as she blushed again, which he found strange. He went back to his mother and hugged her again and started talking to Sansa as Jonel and mother were scolding Arya. Afterwards mother showed him to his rooms. She and Sansa had a new doublet made in the Stark colors and had laid it on the bed to wear for him this evening. He quickly got himself ready and almost ran to the hall. Not being able to hold his excitement of having a moment with his whole family together. Chapter 24, Setting Things in Motion. 299 AC. Rob. He looked outside the window and saw it was a clear autumn morning. He saw how one single cloud slowly passed in front of the window and sighed. The letter. He looked back at his desk and picked up the letter he had gotten from the old lion once more. He offered him peace, but for what? They got nothing for it. He couldn't give him his father back, nor Ed or Lord Meager who had died in captivity from his wounds. He didn't offer to restore all the small folks' livestock and livelihood. No, in fact he offered them very little. Tywin Lannister offered him a peace deal. In turn both houses Stark and Tully, and their vassals, would be reinstated and allowed to keep all their possessions. He and his grandfather would need to swear loyalty to Joffrey. The North and Riverlands would not be asked to help against the Baratheon brothers, and he and his northern army were allowed to go home. They would receive his father's bones, and all captives taken at the Green Fork would be released if he released the Western Lords. For all the Lannisters in his possession the old Tywin would pay great ransoms. He even wrote that this could help rebuild the Riverlands or feed the North in winter. The goal of that man. It would bring peace for now, yes, but he had no doubt the old lion would strike once more when he was strong enough, and this peace would severely weaken the Riverlands. He would never be able to raise a northern host again to come south if he accepted this. Suddenly a knock on the door came. "Let them enter," he called out from behind his desk. His most trusted advisers and strongest lords marched in one by one: Jon, Sir Brynden, Harry On, the Great Jon, Owen Norrie, Galbart Glover, Domeric Bolton, Tytos Blackwood, Sir Stephen Frey, Lord Lionel Deddings, Sir Wendell Marndaly and Mage Mormont. My dear lords and friends, we have a lot to discuss today. First of all, I have gotten a proposal for peace from Tywin Lannister," he said as he handed the letter over to his uncle. Sir Brynden scoffed at its content as he gave it to Galbart. He knows he's losing the war and tries to get out of it without losing face. "We can never accept this." "I agree, Your Grace," Glover said as he read the proposal. Similar things were heard from Sir Wendell, Sir Stephen, Owen, Jon, Domeric, Lord Tytos and Lady Mage. The Great Jon boomed curses at the Lannisters for even daring to propose something like this. He started shouting that they would never bow to that Joffrey and would never again give up northern independence. This all was expected, but it was Harry On's fierce reaction what surprised him. "House Karstark will never accept these terms. You promised me blood, Rob, and we will have it." He looked at his brother-in-law. "I said you would get compensated, in blood or coin. This offer gives neither, so we will not accept. I am however on a mind to send our own peace proposal back to King's Landing. If they accept those terms, we will have peace, but not before that." Harry On looked daggers at him but nodded. "What are the terms you will propose?" Sir Wendell asked. He looked around the room in silence before he spoke. "First of all, I will agree on some of his demands. The return of my father's bones, the prisoner exchange and the ransoms for the Lannisters. I will have the ransom of the Kingslayer be divided between houses Hornwood and Karstark for their losses, while I will compensate my brother for capturing him," he said as he looked at Harry On and then Jon. This didn't seem to be too contested, as it was clear that this was not all. "There is more, of course. They will have to accept our independence. Never will a Riverlord or Northman swear fealty to that inbred bastard and his ugly throne again whilst I live." Now positive grumbles from most of the men could be heard. They will pay the Riverlands huge reparations for the damage they have caused. This will be used to repair the lands, settlements and infrastructure there. They will then give another smaller sum to be shared amongst all the houses, Northern and Riverlander, that fought at the camps or the Green Fork as their spoils of war. Lord Tytos, Sir Brynden and Lord Deddings looked pleased at this. They will also swear to accept any deal our kingdom makes with the Night's Watch. It is time the lands of the new gift once again revert to their original lords. They have been neglected and depopulated for far too long, and I wish to change that. All original lands held by House Umber and the Mountain clans will be returned, for the remaining lands a new small lordship will be created. I plan to offer the Night's Watchmen, coin and goods as well as a guaranteed portion of the income of those lands once they are repopulated in return. Now most looked surprised, while the Great Yon smiled from ear to ear. Your Grace. It is time those lands are returned. I can't thank you enough for it, he said, far more formal and calm than he usually was. Owen Nuri also looked pleased. Did the Nuri's lands border the Night's Watch? He didn't remember. The other northern lords looked curiously upon this, especially Domeric, but said nothing. He turned to Lady Mage. Do you think your brother would accept? She waved her hand through her hair in thought before replying. I think so. They need coin and men and those lands offer them next to nothing. He will haggle though, and we will pay a big sum for it. Good, House Stark has always helped the Watch. Everything we pay above the value of those lands can be seen as a donation to help its existence. Now all his northern lords nodded. No good Northman would ever contest help to the Watch. Lastly, prisoners will be demanded, to ensure peace. Tywine will use this peace to try and defeat Lords Renly and Stannis Baratheon. If he wins, he will most likely try to crush us once more, and I will not allow that to happen. I will demand their Prince Tommen as a hostage until he is of an age. This will give us years to prepare for a possible attack and let us survive through winter without more fighting. The boy is Joffrey's heir, so I believe even they won't try anything. The Great Yon and Lady Mage grunted approvingly, while the Riverlords seemed relieved at the possibility of a long peace. The only one who seemed to doubt was Harry On, but he said nothing. Do you agree to these terms, my lords? Do you wish to add any or change one? He asked in what Bran called his lord's voice. The North can have peace on these terms, the Great Yon shouted, and Lady Mage, Lord Glover, Owen Nuri, Domeric and Sir Wendell nodded. The Riverlands will accept as well, Lord Tytos said, and was easily joined by Sir Brynden, Lord Deddings and Sir Stevron. Good, John, he said as he looked to his brother. I accept. Father would have wanted peace for the people and wanted the new gift back into the North. By having independence and breaking the Lannisters' power and aura of invincibility, we have avenged him enough if we can get peace. He smiled at John then. He had wanted to do nothing more than revenge his father, but father would have wanted peace for the people, and John agreed with this. He looked towards the only one that hadn't answered yet. Harry. The Carstarker looked at him and sighed. Preferably I still want my blood debt, your grace. However, on these terms even we can have peace, his brother-in-law stated, clearly not fully happy with it. Thank you, Harry. Besides, before they can answer this there might be some opportunities to meet Lannisters on the battlefield anyway. I will not have us sit here even longer so the Lannisters can take their time to prepare for another offensive. We will move into the west in 3 days as planned. If they accept, we will retreat. If they don't, well, let's just say that the west will burn harder than the Riverlands ever did, he added grimly. Now Harry seemed to perk up. Your gaze. That I can live with. Good. Now that you are my lords, I have another thing to ask your counsel on. We have heard of troubling news in the Vale. It seems my aunt Lady Lysa Arryn refuses to raise the troops of the Vale under any circumstance. Lord Royce has told her and the Vale Court of House Ursia's children are bastards, but she refuses to do anything about it. From the letters Lord Yon Royce sent me it seems she is losing support quickly, as she seems to behave quite mad. The young Robert Arryn, if he is an Arryn, seems to not be right either. He is said to be too small and childish for his age and obsessed by letting people fly from the Eyrie, the typical Arryn death sentence. Lord Yon seems to fear not only for the Vale but also for the fate of House Arryn. To make matters worse, Lady Lysa isn't responding to any of our letters. She seems to ignore my uncle's, my mother's and my own letters, and none of their contents seem to be known by the Vale Lords in the Eyrie. It seems my aunt has forgotten her family and refuses to help. Now with what we all know here about Robert Arryn's heritage, how do we proceed? He finished. Do we certainly know it to be true? Domeric asked. No, we don't. However, I trust my father on this. He wouldn't have lied. He responded. Besides Lord Eddard's words there is more now. His uncle added. With what I know now and what I have seen of the child when he was younger, I am fairly certain I can recognize parts of Littlefinger in him. Baelish came to Riverrun when he was really young, and Robert looks much alike, even more so now if the letters of Bronze Yon are to be believed. This seemed to have a big impact on the room, and the more skeptic members like Domeric or Sir Stephen nodded. You are the best to know this, Sir Bryndon. Having established Robert's parentage amongst ourselves, I propose a course of action. Domeric surprisingly said. What is it, Dom? He asked of the man that was closely becoming one of his friends here in Riverrun, despite his parentage. I have lived with House Redfort for 3 years. If I were to send him a letter stating Robert's ancestry, he would believe me and act upon it. Maybe you and Sir Bryndon could send the same to Lord Royce and others. Amongst them, they might rile up the Vale against Lysa Arryn. Those houses have many allies in the Vale, they could have the power to overthrow Lady Lysa. He mused, that could work. There is one big problem though, what would happen to my aunt and her son if that were to happen? They would die. Sir Bryndon said, his face like iron and his blue eyes like a storm. Everyone turned towards his uncle, and most of them wisely held their breath. Sir Stephen Free was the only one foolish enough to state with all due respect, Sir Bryndon, but Lady Lysa betrayed her husband and her liege lord. She committed adultery and put her bastard son on the throne of the Vale. You can't possibly think the Valyman will let her go untouched. The look the Blackfish gave the free air would chill many a brave man to the core. If that's the case, we won't tell them. I will not let anything happen to my niece or my grandnephew. Little Robert did nothing wrong. He doesn't even know the truth of his parentage. I won't have him touched. He saw many of his lords shuffle uncomfortably on their chairs and decided to jump in again. It speaks for itself that my cousin should not be harmed, as he is innocent of his parents' crimes. That said, he should be removed from power, and I don't think my aunt will do that peacefully. She will need to be removed with force, and she will have to be punished. There are possibilities to do that without killing her. Would that be agreeable to you, uncle? He said as he looked to Sir Bryndon. The man looked suspiciously at him but nodded, albeit without any optimism. He turned back to the front, before turning back to him and asking what would happen to the boy. I don't know. He could be fostered with family in Winterfell or Riverrun and join one of our households later if allowed, otherwise he could join the Night's Watch when he is older. It also depends on the Vale Lords, but I'm willing to propose them to foster him at Winterfell with my mother or myself as his guardian. Or if you or Uncle Edmure would choose to do so, I would formally back it as well, he said as he thought it over. At this his uncle seemed more satisfied and he nodded. Edmure or Cat would need to care for their nephew. They can decide it amongst themselves later. Good, so with that finished, is everyone in agreement? We will send out messages to Lords Redfort and Royce explaining the parentage of my cousin. In it will be stipulated that he has no blame, and he would ask him to be put into the custody of House Tully or Stark after he is removed from power. We will also ask that Lady Lysa will be punished in a non-lethal way. We will secretly offer these lords an alliance until it is done. After that, we will recognize their new Lord of the Vale if they march on the Lannisters with us. All lords seemed to be in agreement, but the conversation wasn't over yet as Sir Wendell asked. Who would be the new heir to Jon Arryn? He didn't actually know this, neither did most of his advisors. I don't really know. He started saying but was interrupted by Domeric. It is Harold Hardang, he stated simply. Who? Half the lords present asked in unison. Harold Hardang, Domeric repeated. He is a grandson of Jon Arryn's sister through one of her daughters. The lad is a ward for Lady Waynwood, as they are kin somehow. I met him once at a small tourney in Gulltown. He must recently have come of age, I think. He even looks like an Arryn. He has sandy blonde hair and deep blue eyes. Lord Redfort once told me he somewhat looks like Jon Arryn when he was that age. His resemblance to the Arryns and his close kinship to one of its major lords should mean that his rule would be fairly stable if Robert Arryn and his closest supporters are removed. All lords looked at him now and though. This Harold, have you ever spoken to him? Harry on asked. Yes, but not for long. We shortly spoke at the fight, as well as at a feast. He seems capable, both with his head and sword, albeit a bit too proud for my liking. Still, he should do a fine job with advisors like Lady Anya Waynwood, Bronze Yon or Lord Horton Redfort. Domeric responded. This put most lords at ease. The Arryns have always been a proud bunch. So that shouldn't be too much of a problem. Lord Tytos joined in. Very well, that's what we'll do then. He finished the conversation and all lords nodded in agreement. Another thing has come up. It seems like Lady Hornwood has been having difficulty on her border with House Bolton. She speaks of raids happening and getting ever bolder. She doesn't feel safe and asks help is sent. Lord Hornwood is also officially without an heir, as Darin died by the Kingslayer's hand, and she thinks this is one of the reasons for the raids. He spoke up, closely keeping an eye on Domeric as he told this. Domeric, for his part, seemed equally surprised as all the other lords in attendance. Either he was a master mummer, or he didn't know anything either. Most of his lords turned to him as well. I'm sorry, Your Grace, but I know nothing of this. Could this all be a mistake? Or organized by some bandit group along our border? Dom tried to defend himself and his house. A bandit group? Another one, you mean? Harry scoffed. I remember the last one, organized by your bastard brother. I was tasked by my father to help the refugees that it brought to our lands. We even killed some of the bastards. That was no simple bandit group, and I'm willing to bet my rights on Carhold on the fact that this won't be one either. His Grace and my brothers went with me, and so they can attest to this as well. All lords turned questioningly to him. Yes, I was there. It was true that they were no real bandits. In House Bolton's defense, Lord Roose came to Winterfell with the heads of dozens of the bandits himself. Only Ramsay Snow, their leader and Roose's bastard son, seems to have escaped. He tried diplomatically. Ha, escaped? Surely you don't believe that, Your Grace? He probably knows who the leader is. Harry said as he looked mockingly at Domeric. Domeric got angry at this. How dare you accuse me of betraying the king's peace? I have fought loyally through all the battles, just like everyone in this room. I know nothing of this and will defend my house's honor by the sword if you dare to repeat that again. Harry wanted to retort, but he cut in before worse could happen. No one here doubts your loyalty, Domeric, he said as he looked sternly at Harry. We would, however, like an explanation. Can you tell us anything more? Who is in control of the Dread Fort now? Domeric seemed to calm at this, but the last question seemed to surprise him. He looked deep in thought. I don't actually know, Your Grace. I left the Dread Fort the day after we got your letter to raise the banners. My father said he would raise the Bolton Levi by himself, and I should help my aunt, Lady Dustin, to raise hers and try to get the command of it, and so I did. I only rejoined my father in Moat Cailin. He looked at the Bolton heir and saw no signs that he was lying. Good, that makes it clear you have nothing to do with this. I will send a letter to your father in the other army to send word to his castellan to end this, he said to Domeric, before looking at the other lords in the room. I plan to send Lord Harley's Hornwood with some of his remaining infantry north again. He will be able to restore the border, and his strong presence might discourage any possible future actions. His troops would also not be the biggest loss for our armies. The Hornwood cavalry will remain here with us under my direct command. The Hornwoods had some substantial losses to their spear and pike divisions in the battle under Lord Rickard, but their forces are still in fairly good shape. To my latest accounts, they still have some 800 infantry left in the other army. I would send Lord Harley's north with those. This produced some grumbling from his commanders. Do you think it is wise to weaken our forces here in the Riverlands, Your Grace? Lord Galbart asked. Yeah, and why should they be able to leave, while me and mine are bleeding here in these damned southern lands? The Great Jon shouted. Do you wish to leave, Lord Umber? He calmly retorted the giant man. No, no, of course not, Your Grace. I will stay and fight to the last man, I swear it. Still, my brothers or one of my sons would be able to go home, the Great Jon explained fiercely. It's fine, Lord Umber. I understand. I must admit I have ulterior motives to send Lord Harley's north. Ulterior motives, Your Grace? Lady Mage asked. Yes. Lord Harley's is the last remaining member of House Hornwood. If he were to die, a succession crisis could break out, and I'd rather avoid it if I could. If I send him north, he could look for an heir. He has a bastard son, as well as 2 nephews and several cousins through female Hornwood lines. I will let him decide upon the best course for his house and support his decision as to keep the peace, he explained. At this most agreed, as Harry On and Lord Galbart perked up. He knew the latter's brother was the father of the two nephews he spoke about. Harry On and his siblings themselves were cousins to House Hornwood, through their late grandmother Alice Hornwood. He remembered the story as his wife was called after her. I also have another motive, he continued, immediately grabbing the attention of most of his lords. Lord Harleys is an experienced commander and is very good in logistics. He is the perfect candidate to muster more levies in the north if we would need them. I raised the banners quite quickly to try and save my father, and many troops were left in the north because of the speed. I would try to raise some of those to reinforce us here. After this he paused, as he looked around his lords. Some 5,000 fresh extra troops could make the difference in this war. It would mean we could outnumber and overwhelm Lord Tywine, while still protecting the Riverlands or even raiding the Westerlands at the same time. Lord Harleys and his now veteran troops could train, arm and logistically support this host on its way south. Most lords looked pleased at this, especially the Riverlords. From where would you levi these troops, your grace? Lord Galbart asked. I think that most northern houses could spare some more troops, but mostly I would look at the mountain clans and House Marndale. He responded as he looked over to Owen Norrie and Sir Wendell. Owen nodded understandingly at this, but Sir Wendell responded. Our house could of course muster some more men for you, your grace, but nothing numbering in the thousands. He looked at the man. Sir Wendell was loyal to the bone, but he was also his father's son. He would bet his life that the Marndales held back more men than Sir Wendell said. Of course not, Sir Wendell. Other houses will also contribute to this. At this the man nodded, seemingly pleased. So, what do you think of the proposal, my lords? He said as he overlooked all the faces. Good idea, your grace. We could use more men here and it would allow us to win this war on the battlefield with Lord Tywine. Lord Tytos said, being joined by his fellow Riverlanders. A great idea, your grace. If you allow it, I will send a letter to my cousins to start mustering the men and warn the other clans to do the same. Owen Norrie stated, happy to soon be joined by his kin. Aye, more Northmen is a good idea. The great Jon nodded and most Northmen joined in their murmurs. Good, then all the letters will be sent out by the morrow. Cleo's Free will be escorted to King's Landing to offer our terms to that incest king. At the same time he finished the meeting. All men left the room, except for Jon, who came to speak to him. Do you really think the Lannisters will take this? He asked suspiciously. No, I don't. They would be smart to do so, but I don't think they will. That's why we're going into the Westerlands. They might think more seriously on our offer once we burn some of their keeps, steal some gold and defeat their oncoming reinforcements. Even if they don't, the gold will help rebuild the Riverlands anyway, he explained honestly. Yes, that might be right. Jon said in thought. What am I to do when we go to the west? You will be by my side, of course. You're the man I trust the most. I would have you by my side to advise and help me, he said, surprised at the question. This seemed to put his brother on ease. Thank you for valuing me so highly, Rob. Then he looked to his feet and to Ghost, who was standing next to him, before lifting his head and asking. Might I ask you for something for once? Of course, anything, he said, without thinking. In the Westerlands, I would like a command. I think I'm ready, but I will never have my own men. All I can do is ask you for them. It doesn't need to be big. Let my scout something for you, or storm a wall of a castle, or take control of a few villages or something. I know I'm not a lord and you can't give me 1,000 men to sack a castle on my own, but I would still like to archive something of myself in this war. However small that may be. This took him by surprise. He had always seen his brother as his faithful right hand. Even when they were kids, he saw them take castles and win battles together. Of course, it did make sense he wanted to do something on his own. Thinking about it, his brother might even be good at it. When he thought about it some more, he realized that Kevan Lannister, Tywine's famous right hand, had been noted to have been leading the Lannister Center at the Green Fork. His brother could too, and it might also be smart. If he wanted his brother as his right hand, he would have to be able to take command of the Stark men or even the whole army when he was incapable. He should have some experience if he was to ever be put in that situation. Rob, his brother asked, suddenly uncertain. It seemed as he might have been thinking for a little too long. Yes, excuse me, John. I was just thinking it over. Of course, you will be able to get a command. I can't promise you one immediately or in the big battles to come, but if we were to rout the Lannister force under Sir Stafford, things will change. We will have a lot of room to maneuver, and many tasks and commands, big and small, will be needed. I promise you that you will get several when the time comes, he said honestly, trying to stress to his brother how important he and his support were to him and that he was rewarding him for it. John looked elated. Thank you, Rob, he said as he grabbed him in a hug. I just want to make somewhat of a name for myself too here. However small, it might be the only real opportunity I ever get. Well, the only one aside from what you choose to give me when we're back in Winterfell, and all of that will be in the north. He held his arms out to look at his brother, but kept them on his shoulders. That's not true, John. Who do you think I will send to the free cities as ambassador of my kingdom for trade or alliances? My brother, who has been there before, of course. Who do you think will be Castellan of Winterfell in 10 years when I'm to visit the Riverlands to solve their petty quarrels? He stated, maybe a bit too dramatic. He saw his brother's jaw drop. You would make me Castellan of Winterfell? A bastard as Castellan? Yes, I would. Of course, I would. I trust you like I trust no one else. No, of course I would not just trust Winterfell to a bastard. I would, however, trust my keep and my family to my brother, now and always. I would even make you a lord if there was a lordship available, he said matter-of-factly. He saw how John was trying to hide a tear in his left eye, so he ignored it and continued with a smile. What do you think I meant when I repeated that we would do it together all these years? Thank you, Rob, was all his brother whispered as he grabbed him for another hug. They broke apart after a few seconds and saw their direwolves sit happily beside them. Both of their tails were waggling freely as they looked upon them with a strange sense of pride. Is it just me, or do they seem way too intelligent sometimes? John stated as he looked towards Ghost. Definitely not you, he responded as he looked at Grey Wind. As if he was glad for the compliment, Grey started licking his fingers. Sometimes, I feel like he can hear my thoughts or something. Every time when I'm alone and I think of Father without saying or doing anything, he comes over and starts comforting me, his brother said softly as he petted Ghost on the head. Yes, Grey, with me too. He even growls at the lords when I'm getting mad or frustrated with them. I can't explain it, it's like he feels how I feel, he responded carefully. Yes, it is. John admitted, without saying any more. Chapter 25, Going into the West. 299 AC. John. He was in his tent, near Ox Cross. He was waving his hand slowly through Ghost's fur and his companion seemed to like it. It was dark outside, and it had been like that for quite a while. He knew he would need to get some sleep soon, but his thoughts about today's battle kept coming. They had massacred the Lannister force. 9,000 men they had counted, as learned by the prisoners. 9,000 men, and most were gone. Hundreds had retreated with something resembling order, almost 2,000 had dispersed in all directions. Over 6,000 were dead or captured, mostly dead, he thought cynically. The raiding parties under Harry on Karstark, Great Yonumber and Galbart Glover to capture or kill as many of the dispersed troops as they could were still out there. So, the casualties would likely be a little higher. Sir Stafford Lannister had died by Harry On's hand. His son Sir Davin had been killed by Domeric. The man had been able to organize a retreat for some 1,500 men, but Domeric had rallied the Ryswell, Dustin and Bolton cavalry and had charged them from both sides. The man had come to the back himself to give his soldiers a means of escape, which some managed to do because of him. He himself had been killed by Domeric with aid from his uncle Roose Ryswell. The latter had a nasty scar on his arm to prove it. They hadn't been the only Lannisters present, as they had also captured Martin Lannister. He was another son of Sir Kevan, and they planned to send him to his brother to join him in captivity. He hated himself for the fact he was beginning to learn the whole Lannister family tree by heart. The family was massive, mostly due to the amount of children Sir Jason Lannister had produced. Every Lannister he learned the existence from was another one he never wanted to hear from again. The only benefit it brought was the fact that you knew who you were fighting against. A little maliciously, he also thought it helped knowing which branches had already died out and which ones were still to come. Sir Stafford Lannister's line had now ended in the male line. It would do the massive family tree some good if even more of the branches were cut short. They had also managed to kill Rupert Brax, the brother of the important lord that had died at the Battle of the Camps. If it meant another important noble less in the Westerlands, he was all for it. The best possible scenario now was to find the whole Westerlands leaderless and in disarray. It would mean that they could pick Tywin's vassals apart one by one. Another important vassal was captured in a servicery. Same thing as before, more leaderless houses and more coin they could get from his ransom to pay for winter. Some other landed knights like the heads of houses Hugh and Rutiger were also slain. It was an amazing victory. Tywin would not receive any reinforcements from the Westerlands now. The Westerlands also lay completely open to pillage and plunder, and Robb had made it very clear that that was what he was planning to do. The next couple of weeks they would take all the big and smaller castles in the area, with the head price being Ashmark, and they would go from there. Robb had also personally entrusted him that they would try to raid the gold mines. He had also promised him a command soon but hadn't disclosed which one it would be yet. He was both nervous and excited, but also proud to call a man like Robb his king and brother. He would keep his word and would probably even go beyond what he had asked of him. How he had ever thought of joining the Night's Watch, he didn't know, but he was glad he hadn't. This is where he belonged, with his brother fighting for the North and to avenge their father. He stroked Ghost's fur some more, before finally deciding to try to sleep. It would be a long day tomorrow, he knew. A few days later, he was sitting atop his horse and felt powerful for the first time in his life. He had almost 300 riders under his command, all loyal Stark men directly sworn to Winterfell. Robb had commanded him to take some 6 villages between Sussfield and Ashmark, while he and the main force marched on to the latter castle. The villages were controlled by 2 knightly families who both had small holdfasts in the area. He was to take them, strip them of their valuables and capture the family members. They could be worth some coin after. He would then proceed with taking the livestock of the villages and a portion of their grain supplies. Robb had explicitly stated that it wasn't his intent to hurt the small folk, which he was glad for. They also wouldn't take all the food, as to give the local people some chance to survive. Still, anyone who resisted would be put down, and a lot of the food would be taken to feed their army or bring back to the Riverlands. His secondary objective was to screen part of Robb's western flank as he marched on Ashmark. As such, he had sent out over a dozen scouts that kept him up to date on everything that happened. One of them seemed to have returned as he saw a lone rider approach them. The man approached and called out, "Captain Snow, the first holdfast belonging to House Bandel is just behind that hill over there. They have at most 24 trained guardsmen, but could probably call upon a few dozen peasants from the village below it, if we allow them to enter the holdfast. They seem to be oblivious to our arrival here." "Great, thank you, good man. Ride down to the baggage train and tell the man to give you some food and ale from me," he answered. "Thank you, Lord. That is most appreciated," the scout called out with a broad smile as he drove to. "Call a halt, we wait here. Bring my commanders to me, I wish to plan our course of action," he said to one of his men. The fact that Winterfell barely had any knight made the command a bit fussy. Especially for southerners who would be used to knights or squires leading these groups of men. His 6 loyal advisors and sub-commanders weren't knights though. They were either members of small masterly houses living around his home, or were hardened low-born veteran soldiers who had even served with his father in the rebellion. They all stood around a map. "I propose we split into 4 groups of around 70 riders. The first 2 will march on holdfast from either side, they will carry ropes and try to climb the walls. The other 2 groups will do the same to the village, cutting off the villagers from entering and reinforcing the holdfast and, if possible, try to enter through the gate." Everyone agreed. He proposed his plan. All 6 men nodded. He appointed the commanders of the small forces and himself took the command of the group that would attack the village from the west. He got back on his horse and he and his men broke from the column to circle around the hill to the west. When everyone was in position, he gave the signal to a hornblower and all 4 groups came into view and charged the holdfast. He spurred on his horse, a grey destrier he had received from Sir Wendell. They soon reached the border of the small village, Distantly he heard the bells of the September ring in danger, but he paid it no mind. They rode through the gate in the palisade and marched past houses full of scared small folk. All fled at their charge through the village, all but one. A foolish guardsman with a spear defiantly stood in their way. He clearly wanted to go for his horse, trying to kill his enemy's leader, but he never got a chance to do so. Ghost charged on and mauled the man's throat within seconds, before he ever got close to the spearman. He rode past the gruesome remains of the man and whistled. His direwolf immediately left his victim and joined him on his right side. Soon they had taken the market square and he ordered a dozen men to secure it. Meanwhile he shouted for the others to follow him towards the gate of the holdfast that stood upon the small hill next to the village. They were quickly joined by dozens of men from the opposite force that had charged into the village. On their way up the hill, they charged past large amounts of the villagers who had tried to make it up the hill. "Stay down and obey our command and no one will be harmed," he shouted at the screaming men, women and children as he passed, making sure none of his soldiers attacked them. Soon they reached the gates, who hastily shut in front of them, leaving dozens of villagers stuck outside between his force and the walls. A quick glance made it clear to him his troops were already setting up the ropes to climb the walls and they would be able to take the holdfast in less than an hour. He didn't want to lose any more troops, however, neither did he want to kill any more innocent people, so he stepped forward and shouted out, "I am Jon Snow, brother to His Grace, Robb Stark, the King in the North and the Trident. I'm willing to give you the chance to surrender. We outnumber you 10 to 1 and will take this holdfast anyway, but I want to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Open your gates and I promise neither you, your family or your people will be harmed. If you don't, I will burn the holdfast and the village below to the ground." He saw how many men were looking down upon him from atop the wall. He saw soldiers, peasant boys, but also someone that was clearly in charge. "I am Sir Jason Bandel and the knight in charge of Bandel's Refuge." Bandel's Refuge, he vaguely remembered that this was the name of this holdfast from the meeting with Robb. "Good day, Sir Jason. Surrender and your men and people will be spared and left alone. You and your family will be escorted towards the Riverlands with all the honors expected to come with your knightly status. Your holdfast nor your villages will be razed, so you can return and continue ruling after the war is done or a ransom is paid," he said, in his most commanding but respectful tone. "And if I don't," the man responded, clearly not happy with the proposal. "Then my men will storm your holdfast and kill everyone who resists. You will be executed, and your family will be sent to the Riverlands anyway, but this time in less optimal conditions. After all this we will scrap anything useful from the holdfast before burning it and the village below to the ground. Any small folk who resists will die." Sudden murmurs erupted all along the wall as he saw soldiers and peasants alike talk to each other in nervous hushed voices. Sir Jason lifted his hand, and all went quiet. He looked into the man's eyes from below the gate and he looked back. They stayed like that for what seemed like minutes until finally the Westerman said, "You swear on your honor you will let everyone live and they will be unharmed. Including my family and I." "I," he simply responded. The man looked at him once more before he bellowed, "Open the gates." Simple as that, they took control of the first holdfast. They first disarmed the garrison and let them and the small folk leave. After that he took control of the knight's chambers and gave his soldiers orders to gather and count the supplies they could find here and in the village. They had no dead and only 3 wounded. The enemy only lost 7 guardsmen and 3 peasants who had thought themselves heroes. Any other useless loss of life had been avoided and he was glad for it. He was content, as he looked outside of the window to the lands he had taken for his brother. Already squadrons of his men had left with a son and a brother of Sir Jason, to the 2 other villages under their control to force their surrender and take more supplies. In one day, he had finished half of what his brother had tasked him to do in the next 10 days. The day after tomorrow he would finish the rest. Now he needed to gather part of the food to feed the army for the siege of Ashmark. Bran. It was a great day. Alyn, Arya and him had been playing in the Godswood with Nymeria and Summer. The 2 Freys had wanted to join them but they had managed to dodge them, so they only played with Rickon instead. Alyn and him had secretly shown Arya some of the sword fighting moves they had learned in Riverrun with training swords they had managed to smuggle out of the armory. His sister seemed quite good at them, although she was too frail for the heavier moves. Mother and most of the household were too busy to watch them most of the time. They had to prepare for the upcoming harvest feast, and already some lords had started arriving. He was on his way to one of those now. Lord Wyman Marndale had asked an audience with House Stark before the feast, and he was supposed to attend as the heir to his brother. Luckily for him, he wouldn't have to do too much, just sit there and listen how the fat man discussed things with Mother, Alice, Sir Roderick and Maester Lewin. He quickly dressed himself in more suitable attire and went on his way. He arrived in the Lord's Solar and saw that everyone was already there. His father's chair was still empty, and his mother sat next to it in a chair that was brought over. She motioned him over to sit, and he did so obediently. On the other side of the chair sat Alice as the reigning queen. He looked around the room. "I'm sorry I'm late, my lord, I didn't mean to offend," he said to Lord Marndale. "Why, no prince is ever late," the Lord of White Harbour responded amiably. "Those who arrive before him have come early, that's all." He boomed with a laugh. He looked over to his mother and she smiled at him. Good, she didn't seem mad. Lord Wyman proposed to start minting Rob's own coinage, and Mother, Alice and Maester Lewin were clearly surprised but happy with the offer. They gave Lord Marndale the permission to start working on some models for silver and gold coins and prepare a workforce to start immediately after the models were accepted. Next up, Lord Wyman proposed something much more unexpected. "The king has asked me to raise additional troops for his campaigns in the south. I am already raising 600 men, mostly peasants or laborers that I am training to become footmen or archers. I could raise some more, although I think that would be a mistake." "A mistake, Lord Marndale? How could sending troops to my husband the king on his orders ever be a mistake?" Alice said, clearly not amused. "I will of course send men to the king, my queen. I have already sent troops south, both my sons amongst them, and I will send 600 more now. I would never refuse an order of House Stark. That being said, I think I could do things with the remaining manpower that could be far more beneficial to his grace's cause than send him a few hundred more footmen." The Lord patiently explained, and this made him curious. What could be more important to Rob than soldiers right now? "What are you hinting at, Lord Wyman?" his mother asked, not unkindly. "I propose to build his grace a war fleet. The North has had no strength at sea for hundreds of years, since Brandon the Burner burned his father's ships. Grant me the gold, and within the year I will float you sufficient galleys to take Dragonstone and King's Landing both. Maybe we could even pressure you sister in joining us with it, Lady Stark." This piqued his interest. In his mind's eye, he saw a massive war fleet in the waters of the Bight. All of their sails had direwolves or mermans on them, and he loved the idea. His mother seemed less thrilled. "A war fleet, Lord Wyman? What costs would that imply, and what use would it be?" "The costs itself would be great, but House Marndale would pay half of it. The other half I would ask House Stark to give to me." "Well, for its purpose, first of all it could give us leverage over the Vale. His Grace still has to decide what to do with the Vale and the information that good Ned, may the gods old and new rest his spirit, gave him. Secondly, it could greatly help our forces to put pressure on both Stannis and the Lannisters. I promise you that in a year it will be able to attack even King's Landing if need be. Thirdly, even if his grace doesn't need the fleet right now, it would still serve as a formidable new defense to his new kingdom. The fleet would be able to protect the entire eastern coast of the north, all the way from Skagos and Carhold down to White Harbour. It could give us complete control over the Bight and threaten everyone who would name us their enemy from there to dawn." The Lord of White Harbour responded. Maester Lewin responded. "A very tempting offer, my lord. However, you must know that House Stark's coffers are low right now with funding the war and Lord Eddard's previous road planning that has drained on its reserves." "I do, Maester. I also know that due to those roads, taxes have increased from White Harbour to Barrowton and up to Wintertown. The extra revenue created there might be a possible source of income. Maybe even more importantly is the fact that our young king will be taking many spoils in the war. Spoils that might immediately come to good use. They captured most of the funds of the Kingslayer's army at Riverrun, a formidable amount, and I believe it only the beginning." The fat lord tried to persuade the Maester. It seemed to have worked somewhat, as Maester Lewin looked at his mother and Alice and said to Lord Wyman that they would send it over for Rob for his consideration. The meeting ended and he walked into the courtyard. There he saw dozens upon dozens of men train with sword and axe. The new recruits that Sir Roderick had brought in to join Rob in the south. He had already raised 300 men and even more were coming in every day. Poor people from Wintertown, farmers' sons, older men who didn't think they would survive the coming winter, all came. He had heard Cleesewin, Lord Clee now, was doing the same in Castle Sewin and many other houses were also raising men. Sir Roderick even told him that Rob had called for the mountain clans to be raised. They would gather slowly and had a long march to go from their mountains before they reached Winterfell. Until then, all the lords closer to Winterfell had time to raise, arm and train their new levies. It was said Rob wanted 5,000 more men and Sir Roderick said it would be possible, so he trusted they knew what they were doing. Suddenly Alis came from behind him. Bran, she called out. Would you like to join me with your sisters and Alyn? We could play a game, or I could tell you more stories of the north that I heard when I was little. Excited, he immediately said yes. He loved Alis' stories. She grew up far more to the north than even Winterfell and a lot of other stories had survived there, she said. Stories of magic and the long night. Stories about the first men, who hang the entrails of their slain enemies in the weirwood trees. She also told stories of their more recent history. Stories about the Wilderling invasion in which his great-great-grandfather had been killed or of the Scattersea rebellion that had been put down by his kinsman Lord Barthogan Stark. He gladly promised to get Arya and half an hour later, his sisters, Alyn and he were all sitting in half a circle in front of Alis. She had made sure there were all of their favorite snacks were available. She had even ordered the kitchen to make Sansa a bunch of lemon cakes. He looked over siblings and their wolves cuddled against them or on their laps and smiled. It was good to be with the pack. He then looked to Alis again and to the ever-growing bump in her belly. The pack will soon grow, he thought with a smile. He was excited to meet his little niece or nephew and was wondering how they would name the babe. It would be fun to play with and maybe it could be a suitable playmate for Rickon. He would definitely get the babe to become used to summer, so when Rob returned he or she wouldn't shy away from Grey Wind. That could hurt Rob and he wouldn't want that for his brother. Alis saw him smile and smiled back sweetly, winking at him as she saw him steal one of Sansa's cakes. Chapter 26, Going Back North. 299 AC. Harley's Hornwood. They had been marching for days and had finally reached the end of the causeway. He saw the 3 towers of Moat Cailin stick up into the sky as a welcome guide home. The towers stood a little straighter than the last time he had went back to the north with an army. He had still been the heir to the Hornwood then, his old father had remained home as he had gone south with Ned. Oh good old Ned, how had he managed to get himself killed by Southerners just as his siblings? After all he had done and survived, it seemed like a cruel end. Whatever the case, he had managed to clean up Moat Cailin nicely. The towers stood straighter, the fields were cleaner, the rubble was sorted out of the way and his son Rob had even built wooden barracks for the soldiers. There also were a new inn and stables. His horse would be grateful for that. Some fresh hay and a roof over its head. He and his soldiers marched for another hour and a half before they reached what was now accepted as the entrance to the moat. Here they were greeted by a Captain Cregard. He was the captain of the 200-men garrison they had left, when they went south. Most of them were archers, supplemented by a few dozen footmen. That was not unlike his own force. At the Battle of the Green Fork, he had lost around 150 of his spear and pikesmen. He still had the remaining spears, all his archers and his sword and axemen with him. His cavalry he left with Robb Stark, King Robb Stark now. He didn't know what to think about that, but it was 10 times better than a Lannister king. Maybe it would be good for the North to rule its own again. It wouldn't need to give taxes to those damn Southerners anymore and could use it to feed and develop its own people and lands. He was done with the South for the rest of his life. He had lost his cousin when he went down the first time and now his son and only heir the second time. He had loved Darin and every night he still dreamed of the boy. He had been the perfect heir for his house. He was courageous, smart and learned. He had inherited most of his looks which, according to his wife, had made him a very handsome young man. He had even been in talks with houses Umber, Marndale and Flint for possible marriages for him. All neighbors or rivals of the Boltons, as he felt he needed to check their power. He seemed to have been right as his wife reported raids once more on their border. He had almost come to blows with Roos over it at the twins, but Ricard had stopped him. He had said that he supported him but couldn't do anything now or they would fracture the army. Not much later the letter from the king came saying he was to go north with all his infantry. His task was to stabilize his home and help raising reinforcements. He already knew he wouldn't go with them, neither would his troops. He had fought capably at the Green Fork and lost men there, and he lost his son at the Whispering Wood. He had given enough there. Besides, his cavalry was still down there fighting directly for the Stark of Winterfell. He would support House Stark loyally from up north as his house had always done. Looking at Moat Cailin, he thought it could be easily strengthened and reinforced, and he would use his forces for that so the others could go south. He would do that now for a few days, as he let his forces rest. He needed to send word to his wife that reinforcements were coming, so she wouldn't be afraid anymore. He would also contact Lord Wyman for a possibility to ally themselves against House Bolton, if need be. With Roos and his heir in the south, he and Wyman had no real opposition here in the north. Of course, he would always need to obey Winterfell and they would follow his moves, but still, he could probably strike back effectively if need be. He organized himself and his servants in the gatehouse tower and spent the rest of the day going over the garrison and the supply situation. At night he went to greet his son's bones before going to sleep. He had done that every night since he received them. Ned's son had been so gallant as to have his bones prepared for travel by the Silent Sisters and sent it up to him when his younger brother passed by the twins. He had wanted to send it north much sooner, but for some reason he couldn't. No, he and his son would go to the Hornwood together for one last time. There was also the matter of the succession. His house was weak, too weak. He didn't have a clear heir and the other houses could smell blood in the water. He needed to fix this, and soon. He had been thinking about it for a long time. There were two clear possibilities. One was his bastard son Lance. The boy was being raised in Deepwood Motte, so he would have gotten a good education on which he could build. The other possibility was Biron Tallheart, his sister Birina's younger son. The boy would need to be raised by him and change his name, but it could work. The latter option would go a lot better with his wife, but he still leaned towards Lance. It should be his son that sat on their family's centuries-old throne, not his sister's. How to break this to his wife though? He would wait, send letters to Deepwood Motte in silence and grief with his wife in the meantime. After a while he would go and get Lance and ask for his legitimization from the king. He wouldn't be fighting anytime soon anymore, so he had the time to wait. He spent the next 3 days ordering more wooden barracks and stores to be built for the approaching reinforcements the king was raising. Wood had to be cut for it, and he was thinking of building a simple wooden palisade around the perimeter to better protect the area from bandits, thieves or wild animals. He discussed the plans with Captain Kragard and had promised to leave 300 of his men here to help the preparations. In time they would also build way stations on 1 and 2 days marching from Moat Cailin, but that wasn't for now. He and his 500 remaining men left for White Harbor, where they arrived 4.5 days later. They were graciously hosted by Lord Wyman and they spoke of the many dangers the Boltons presented. He also had grievous news for him. Apparently, the Bolton bandits had stepped up their game and were now raiding far from the border, deep into his lands. His wife had closed herself off in his ancestral castle until reinforcements came. Lord Wyman promised him the support of Sir Marlon, his and Donella's cousin, and 400 of his men. Under his command the force of 900 men marched towards his home. They first followed the White Knife for multiple days and bent off with its first tributary, and soon they were in his family's lands. Then they followed the road to his home. Everywhere he went from there, he was greeted with relief and joy, and their force swelled to 1,000 men as the masterly houses sworn to him all joined with a few of their men to rid the lands of the raiders. 3 days from his home he was joined by a surprising, but welcome sight. Stark banners were spotted in the distance. Sir Roderick Castle had come with 300 men from Winterfell to aid him and his house. He knew he could always count on House Stark, but it was still very touching to see. Together their forces marched on and soon they were home. When he saw Donella again he hugged her fiercely, and they cried together at the bones of their son. He grieved and spent a lot of time with her, while also commanding the force. He sent out smaller forces to garrison the villages closest to his castle and many scouts beyond that. 3 days after his arrival they had a burial for Darin. It was as good as it could ever be. He was devastated but didn't let it show to his vassals and allies. Later on, when he was alone with Donella, he cried the whole night in her arms. He wanted it to stop, but the tears just kept flowing. Oh, how he missed that boy. The following morning, he swore he would ensure the survival of his house then. He would preserve House Hornwood and Darren's memory with it. First of all, he needed to get rid of these bandits. His scouts had managed to bring back their location. He called for his captains and Sir Marlon and Sir Roderick, and together they made a battle plan, and they left 2 days later. He left some more men in the Hornwood and marched with 1,200 men in the direction of the Bolton scum. His scouts reported that the bandits numbered around 300 to 400 men, a force way too big for normal bandits. Whatever it may be, they were strongly outnumbered, so he would make short work of them. On the insistence of Sir Marlon, he kept a line of scouts around his force in all directions. This would prove a stroke of genius, as on the 4th day after leaving the Hornwood they were almost ambushed. His scouts reported the ambush position back to him just in time, and he managed to get his army in a makeshift battle formation before the Boltons struck. He looked over his battle formation and saw that a few of his men had died due to something he couldn't identify. Soon the news came that the whole field was littered with spike traps. They had managed to avoid most of them, however 3 or 4 had still struck their mark. It was a pity for the men he lost, but it would make no difference. Soon he heard the familiar whistles of arrows being fired, and he saw how the Bolton force had circled round to his right flank and were attacking there. He jumped into action. Archers, fire at the right. Get in a better position. He called out for a rider. Get a message to Sir Marlon. Tell him that the center and I will turn right. He is to move closer to the main force, while also screening our back. I don't trust these Boltons to not have any more surprises in store for us. The rider immediately left for the left flank where Sir Marlon and his Mandaeally troops were positioned. He then turned with his whole force to help Sir Roderick and the Stark troops who were being pressured hard on the right. Soon his foot reinforced the Stark line. He immediately saw that his troops outnumbered the enemy ones. To take advantage of this, he called out for 2 of his sword companies, all around 100 infantry strong, to circle around both flanks and start to pincer in the enemy. In the meantime, his more numerical archer force was making short work of their own archers. This battle is nearly won, he thought as he looked over the field. That was until he heard something behind him. He saw how around 100 horse came in his rear and charged at his army. Sheer panic rose in him as he saw the enemy cavalry charge. Luckily Sir Marlon had done a great job. The Mandaeally spears obstructed the cavalry from going in his troops' rear. A neatly organized line of White Harbor spears, followed by swords and axes, stood defiantly in the way. He immediately shouted at his archers, change targets to the cavalry on the left, fire at will and make it quick. He also sent out a rider to peel some of his spearmen from the line and turn around. Only a fraction of his bowmen managed to get shots of in time, but it was still enough to floor a dozen of horsemen and hamper part of their charge. The rest then crashed into the spear wall. The wall held in most of the places, but it was breached thrice. He looked on as he saw how 2 of those holes were plugged by sword and axemen, as they pulled riders from their horses and finished them on the ground. Only at one place a dozen riders broke through completely. He shouted out for his retinue, some 40 retainers on horseback, to follow him, and charged at the group. He saw how a few more riders were charging through the hole in the line, as Sir Marlon tried to plug the hole in his lines. He shouted for his men to go into a charge, and they thundered down upon the Bolton soldiers. He came upon a rider who awkwardly tried to block his downward cut. He managed to do so but lost his sword in the progress. A quick backhanded slash as he turned in the saddle was enough to split open the man's neck. He thundered through, flooring an enemy that had lost his horse, until he came upon the hole in the spear wall. There he clashed with another rider. This one had been prepared for his arrival, and they exchanged blows, while his remaining retinue subdued the other enemies that had broken through. He couldn't find a hole in the enemy's defense, but soon 2 spearmen pushed their spears under the enemy's face and the man surrendered. He gathered his breath and looked around. He saw how the last remainders of the charge were being disarmed or cut down. Around a dozen riders were fleeing into the woods, and as he was looking around for more, a rider came to him saying, the enemy's infantry has been dealt with, Lord Hornwood. Sir Roderick has also led a charge into the enemy archer line and dispersed them. Good, thank you, he stated to the man. He then shouted at the top of his lungs, the day is ours, lads. We have shown these bastards what true Northmen can do. A series of cheers erupted from the line as he made his way to Sir Marlon. Good advice to screen the back, Lord Harley's, the man said with a grim smile on his face. An even better execution, Sir Marlon. That charge could have been devastating had it reached the main line. Me and my men thank you for the speed at which you made that defensive line, he said honestly. Who knows how many hundreds of men he would have lost to that charge, if it had connected to their rear. Just following orders, my lord, the man simply stated. Can you organize your troops here? Let them loot the bodies, but the loot of the enemy camp will go to us, as most of it will have been stolen from the surrounding small folk, he said, and the knight nodded. He jumped on his horse and rode over to the other side of the field. There he had a similar conversation with Sir Roderick. He organized his own infantry himself and allowed his archers to join looting the enemy as well. After a while he organized a group of men and marched into the enemy camp. There he found a few wounded bandits, but what shocked him most were the bodies of half a dozen people put on weird crosses around the commander's tent. They looked flayed. The skin was peeled from their bodies, some remnants still hanging from their fingers or faces. It was such a gruesome sight that he almost threw up. He managed to keep himself in check for his men, but only barely. Some of his soldiers weren't as lucky, as he heard the sound of multiple men vomiting all along the camp. They also found several young women, all naked and scared to death. When one of his men wanted to approach them or give them a blanket, they all just started screaming. It was very clear they had witnessed and experienced severe things. He had his men calm them and bring them together to offer them food, clothes and shelter. After this, they looted the camps of its valuables and soon found Bolton livery in some of the tents. This was all the proof he needed. They finished looting the camp and then they buried the dead, burned the tents, sealed their fires and left. He walked over to Sir Roderick and showed them both the Bolton liveries, as well as the women whom they had saved. The knight looked very serious, before stating, "This will have to be brought to the king and queen to decide on. For now, their force is destroyed, and your lands are safe. I also heard the Boltons suffered many casualties along the Green Fork. They won't be as big of a problem now, if they should try anything in the future." He nodded at that. He still smiled over the fact that Ricard had found a way to cull the power of the Boltons by granting them the honor of leading the first line of defense at that battle. Roose Bolton had lost over half of his force and had now less manpower than even the Freys, Marndalis, Carstarks and Umbers in the force he left south. He didn't even come close to what Winterfell had brought with them. No, Roose in the south would be checked, it was here in the north that he worried. They met with Marndalis and headed back to camp with their men. They had 147 dead and 84 severely wounded. Not bad, considering the enemy had numbered close to 400 men combined with the fact they had set an ambush. They let their men feast to their victory, as they discussed their plans. Sir Marlon would go directly back to White Harbour from here. With the absence of Lord Wyman's sons, he was responsible for drilling all the new recruits and would need to be home to fulfill his duties. He did, however, repeat multiple times that House Marndalis would again come to their aid if new problems arose on his border. Sir Roderick would get back with him to the Hornwood and would go to Winterfell from there. They would leave the day after tomorrow at midday, to give their men some well-deserved rest. It would also help the wounded to strengthen themselves a little bit. Those who were still not able to be transported on the carts the whole way would be left at neighboring villages until they were nursed back to health. Battle was a bloody and gruesome affair and they hadn't managed to capture the enemy commander, so he knew it wasn't over. However, they had killed many of his soldiers and gotten more than enough proof to take his head when he next resurfaced. Dozens of prisoners had attested that they had been led by Ramsay Snow. Numerous accounts of his crimes had also been reported. He would have the bastard's head in time. Now he would first go back home. 5 days later, he marched back into his ancestral home and was glad for it. His force now numbered around 650 men, as the Marndalis had left. He had expected to be received as a hero here, but the mood was dark and gloomy. He sought out his wife, jumped off his horse and marched to her. He enveloped her in a hug and proudly stated that the Bolton bandits had been vanquished and that their lands were safe once more. His wife smiled at him and said she was proud, although it didn't reach her eyes. "What is it?" he asked, surprised at her reaction. "Something happened while you were away, Harleys. We got word 4 days ago that the Ironborn have attacked the north. Asha Greyjoy, the daughter of Lord Bolton, is besieging Deepwood Motte as we speak. Raiders and longships have also been spotted along the stony shore," his wife said softly. "What? Ironborn? Are you sure?" he exclaimed. "Yes, my love, but that's not even the worst of it. Victorian Greyjoy has led most of the Iron Fleet to Moat Cailin and taken the fortress from the west. The owner of the new stables managed to flee to White Harbour and Wyman sent us a raven," his wife said sadly. "They took Moat Cailin. How? I had just strengthened the defending force there to over 500 men. Most of its garrison were our own men. I even spent time helping with the fortifications of the old fortress. How could this happen?" he said in complete shock. Victorian Greyjoy marched on the fortress with thousands of men, outnumbering the defenders many times. Another letter arrived yesterday where it was clear the castle was taken. It seems your efforts had borne some fruit, as it is said the Ironborn had very heavy casualties. Wyman guesses them at 3 or 4 dead Ironborn for every Northman killed. That would mean 1,500 to 2,000 dead Ironborn. For Moat Cailin. How can Lord Bolton be that stupid? He can't seriously suspect to achieve something with that. The Ironborn in Moat Cailin are surrounded by us and the Crannog men and Rob in the south," he responded, still in shock from the news. "My love, if the Ironborn had 2,000 casualties attacking the fortress with a garrison of only 500, how would you fare against thousands guarding it?" she asked, the fear in her voice clear. True words. "However, we can make them bleed. We can assemble the levies that originally would have been going south to throw the Ironborn back from Deepwood Motte and the Stony Shore. Maybe we could then unite with some of the northerners in the south and siege out Moat Cailin from both sides," he said, deep in thought. "Sir Roderick and I have much to speak about, Donella. We will be up in my chambers. Could you order the servants to bring up some food? I fear it might take a while," he asked his wife. She nodded dutifully and he thanked the gods once more for the wife they had given him. "I am very glad to see you again and thank you," he said softly, as he kissed her hand. He saw how she nodded with a small smile, before he left to get Sir Roderick and lead him to his solar. They spent hours discussing possible plans of action. Finally, they settled on the fact that they would leave for Winterfell in 2 days. There they would raise the forces left in Winterfell and the troops of the Sowins and the surrounding lords. They would also make contact with the mountain clans. The clans had been levying their men for weeks now and would be able to march to Deepwood Motte soon, if ordered. They could outnumber the Ironborn over 2 to 1 just on their own. The forces they rallied in Winterfell would split and help dispel the Ironborn from the Stony Shore as the second force marched on Deepwood Motte as well. If their plan worked, they could throw most of the Ironborn out of the north in a matter of weeks. The only problem would be Moat Cailin. Filled with thousands of men, even Ironborn scum, the fortress was impregnable. Even with the 5,000 troops that had been scheduled to go south they wouldn't be able to take it. However, with help from some of the troops in the south they might be able to starve them out from all sides. The Crannog men might give additional support if need be. He spent the rest of the evening planning the provisions and arranging his forces and their march. At night, he finally had some time to spend with his wife. She was clearly worried, having had to endure Bolton raids and now hearing of the threat of an Ironborn attack. He managed to calm her, as he explained no Ironborn had ever made it as far inland as the Hornwood. He promised her, he would leave additional troops in their castle and establish a series of patrols along the border to scout out any trouble before it really began. That is exactly what he did for most of the next day, together with working out his plans of the night before. That was until suddenly another raven from Winterfell arrived. It was a message from their new queen, although he recognized the handwriting of Winterfell's Maester. "Lord Hornwood. Word has come from my husband's campaign down south. Our forces have won a great victory over the Lannisters at Oxcross. They have destroyed an army under Sir Stafford Lannister, Lord Tywin's cousin and brother-in-law. Sir Stafford and his son and heir Sir Davin were both killed in the battle. Martin Lannister, youngest son of Lord Tywin's brother Sir Kevan, was captured together with the heads of houses Crickehall, Jast and Vickery. Multiple other lesser nobles were also slain or captured, and the west seems to be in disarray. The king has followed up his victory by storming and capturing Ashmark and its lord Daemon Marbrand. There he has also captured Willem Frey, a grandson of Lord Tywin's sister. He has sent word from the castle to implore how the reinforcements south are coming along. However, Lady Stark and I urge you to use these reinforcements, and the troops sent with Sir Roderick Castle, to rid the north of the Ironborn first. After this is achieved, the men will move south as planned. I would implore you to urgently reply and act upon this letter. Aelys Stark, Queen of the North and the Trident. He sighed, finally some good news. He walked over to his maester's chambers and asked for a map of the Westerlands. The young maester gave one to him and he spread it out, quickly finding Ashmark. That's where his men and his king were. The castle commanded much of the northeastern Westerlands, so their troops would be free to plunder. Good, let those filthy Lannisters feel the vengeance of the north for what they did to his son in the Riverlands. The orders from the Queen were nothing he and Sir Roderick hadn't decided upon already. He scribbled a small message describing their victory over the Bolton bastard combined with the fact that they would depart with 600 men tomorrow, before giving it to the maester to send back to Winterfell. He brought the map with him to his solar and called over Sir Roderick. Both drank a good northern ale to the good fortune of their king and to vengeance upon the Lannisters. He toasted to Darin, while Sir Roderick drank to his nephew that was slain in King's Landing. His king would give him the vengeance he deserved and in turn he would help him rid his kingdom of Ironborn scum. He didn't want to go fight anymore, he felt tired. However, the only hope for House Hornwood and his blood was stuck behind the walls of Deepwood Motte, being besieged by Ironborn. Galbart and Robert deserved his help for caring for the boy all those years. It would only be just if he helped free their lands now. More importantly was the matter of Lance. He couldn't save Darin anymore, but he would let the others take him before he allowed something to happen to his other son. Every Ironborn that stood between him and his son would rue the day he was born. This, he swore silently as he drank deeply from the dark ale. Blood and battle and his estranged son on his mind. Chapter 27, Raiding the Westerlands. 299 AC. Robb. He looked on the glowing and fertile hills of the Westerlands on his right and the sea on his left. Much and more can be said about its inhabitants, but the land itself was beautiful. The afternoon sun reflected beautifully over the ocean, as his army snaked along the road next to it. He was on the march with some of his army. He had split up his forces so they could cover more ground after taking Ashmark. First, they had spread thinly, taken out all holdfasts and small keeps of its knightly houses in the vicinity. Secondly, they were now spreading across most of the northern Westerlands. He himself was on his way to the crag with Jon, Sir Brynden and almost half his force. Lady Mage Mormont was scouring the lands between the Tumblestone and the ruins Castemaria for cattle. She would drive them together to the Riverlands to feed both its people and the army in the future. If his estimations were correct, he wouldn't need to worry about feeding his army for months after this campaign. Meanwhile Lord Glover and Harry On were raiding the coast from the Straits of Fair Isle to his own position. All the gold, valuables and prisoners they could find would be transported to Ashmark, which was strongly garrisoned. He had decided it would serve as his base of operations in the Westerlands. Lastly the Great Jon was raiding the gold mines. He had already raided Castemaria and was now marching to Nuns Deep, after depositing his loot in Ashmark as well. They would reach the crag in 3 days his scouts had told him. The castle wasn't too strongly garrisoned. The Westerlings were a proud but impoverished house. Their lord, Goran Westerling was being kept prisoner in Seaguard and most of its forces were destroyed at the Battle of the Camps. He expected a short but fierce resistance, as he had to storm the keep. It was what it was, he didn't expect the Westerlands to surrender without a fight. He would like to keep the bloodshedding to a minimum, especially for his own forces, but some of it couldn't be helped. The most important thing was that they would take another Westerlander keep. He would show the lords of the Westerlands that still stayed with Lord Tywin in Harrenhal that their lands weren't safe as long as they served him. He would also show the Lannisters what happened when you angered the North and House Stark. Lastly, he would get revenge for the Riverlands. If the Westermen thought they could plunder, sack and pillage their way through his mother's family lands, then they had something coming. He would feed all the Riverlanders that had to flee from their homes with food and coin they got from the Westerlands. See how Lord Tywine liked that? You think it will work? John asked from next to him. The plan you mean, he responded. Yes, do you think Lord Tywine will come? Will we manage to get him to break west? His brother clarified. Yes, I think so. We have already taken out House Marbrand and most of its vassals. The old lion's own mother was a Marbrand, so that should anger him some at least. Once it becomes clear to him and his lords that we are not only taking everything in these valleys that we can but are also picking off their keeps one by one, they will want to go home to protect their lands. How long it will take I cannot say, it might take a while. After Nuns Deep and the Crag we will see. If they are not here yet by that time, we can do the same as we did to the Marbrands to houses Sussfield and Banefort and all the smaller houses in between. If they don't come then I would be very surprised, but it wouldn't be a problem. We could send most of our loot to the Riverlands and ask for some reinforcements to start threatening Lannisport until they come. Anyway, the idea is always the same, the longer they wait the more the Westerlands will burn and the more coin we will bring back to the North and Riverlands in the end, he explained casually. If Lord Tywine wanted to let his vassals burn, he wouldn't complain. His lords were eager for both the loot and to show the North's fury upon the families that had killed his father. He would give them that, it could even enrich and feed his lands and people in the next winter. You almost make it sound easy. Pillage and conquer a little until the old lion shows up and we kick him a little until the cat makes a mistake and falls in our trap. John huffed. Well, that's because that's basically what it is now. The Westerlands are in complete disarray. The last reports I received told me of how Sir Damian Lannister was trying to reform the few survivors of Oxford at Lannisport. It doesn't seem like he is having much success at it and there is no way for him to find easy, trained reinforcements. No, the northern and central Westerlands are up for the taking. The keeps in the south and southeast will be too heavily fortified, and Casterly Rock is impregnable. For the rest it will just take time. If we are careful and methodical everything can fall, even Lannisport or the Golden Tooth if the old lion gives us too much time. He said decisively. Lannisport, Rob. Are you sure that wouldn't be reaching a little? His brother asked, always the skeptic. However, he liked it like that. He kept him sharp and made sure he went over his plans a third and fourth time until he was sure of everything. We'll see. If Lord Tywine comes earlier, we won't even march near it. It's just a possibility. We'll take the crag first and then we'll see. He responded, as he shrugged. At this, his brother nodded. First we'll take the crag. Together. He looked at John, who started resembling his father more by the day. Always together, he responded as he clasped his right hand on his brother's left shoulder. They then talked a little about home and their siblings until finally John said. Rob, see that hill over there? To the right around a mile from here. He looked to where his brother pointed. Yes. Could be a good safe place to set up camp tonight. No, his brother asked as he looked questioningly at him. It would. He responded, as he looked to how far the sun had already lowered. They wouldn't be able to march much further today anyway. Owen, he shouted out, as he turned in the saddle. Yes, Your Grace, the man shouted back from behind him. We'll set up camp tonight on that hill to the right there. Can you make sure that it is signaled down the line, so everyone knows? Of course, Your Grace. Consider it done. The man said as he turned his horse and started riding down the line. Soon the hornblowers sounded the familiar signal he had heard every day on the march now. As they went off the road and up the hill, he complimented his brother. Good find, brother, this will do excellently. John smiled at him but stayed silent, until asking softly a little later. Do you know where they are? He didn't have to specify who he meant, as they both felt it. Yes, they are hunting a little to the east of here. They won't be long, I don't think, he responded honestly. I thought the same thing. How do you think we can know? John asked. I don't know. I just feel it. Like in the back of my head I feel his presence or something. It has become stronger ever since you told me you felt it too, and I started paying more attention to it. I can feel where he is almost all of the time now, and if he howls it's almost as if I can hear what he says," he responded in a hushed voice, so his men wouldn't hear. "Yes, for me it's the same. 2 nights ago, I even woke up with the taste of blood in my mouth, and a little later Ghost entered and he still had blood from his kill on his snout." "Do you think it could be what we last spoke about?" John asked, and his grey eyes looked fearful. "That we could be wargs, you mean?" he whispered. "I don't know. I don't feel different. I just feel more connected to Grey, that's all. It also feels safer, like the more we understand each other the better we can protect each other and our loved ones. I don't know how to explain it, but Grey thinks of you and Ghost as pack. He knows you are family and he would die for you just as I would." "No one is dying," his brother responded, hushed but harshly. "Not for me or for anyone else, we already lost father. I won't lose anyone else." As he said it, he could see his brother's jaw clench as his eyes looked fiercely in the distance. "No, no, of course not," he responded. "It's just he knows what you and our siblings mean for me and that he agrees that we protect the pack. That's all." Now John nodded. "Ghost is the same. If I think back at it, it was Ghost who notified me of the Kingslayer's charge in the Whispering Wood. It was like he was saying you were in danger and you needed help. He did the same at Oxcross, when I got that spearman that was charging you." "Hey, I had that one," he responded fiercely. "I was just waiting until I could deflect his spear and counterattack to reach his neck with my sword." "Sure, you did," his brother laughed. "Whatever the case, I know what you mean." He nodded at that. A few seconds later he asked, "Do you think Grey will think the same of Alice and our child?" "Of course, he will. Don't you remember how Grey was with Alice those days in Moat Cailin? That was the only time I have ever seen him leave your side for so long. To keep watch over Alice. He will do the same for you, child, I'm sure. To be honest, you might want to keep him in check. Between Alice and your child, you might not even see the damn direwolf anymore." His brother laughed, as he winked at him. He gave him a sour look, but inside he felt better and less worried. He still couldn't believe he was to be a father. The biggest problem was that the man who he wanted to ask for guidance, wasn't here anymore. His father would have known what to do. He always did. They then had to stop talking as they had to guide the men in setting up camp. John took over half his duties, as he was used to by now. It gave him some more time to think on the campaign and the politics, and he knew that's why his brother did it. After a small meeting with his commanders, they all went to their sides of the camp. He sat at a campfire with his closest battle companions. His brother, Tor, the Small John, Owen Norrie, Daisy Mormont, Domeric Bolton, Robin Flint, Lucas Blackwood, Sir Pewin and Oliver Free, and the elder ones, Sir Donald Locke and Sir Wendell Marndaly. They were having a great time, telling stories and drinking ale. The ale they raided from the Westerlands was not as good as the one from the north, but as the Small John was wont to say, if you drink enough of it, you almost don't taste the difference anymore. Suddenly they were interrupted, as a guard arrived at their fire. "Your Grace," he asked. "Yes," he responded. "A message has come by rider from Ashmark, Your Grace. He says it's urgent." He nodded, sad to leave his friends. "I'll come back after," he said to them, and all nodded but John, who stood up. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked his brother. "Coming with you, got anything against that?" he asked as Ghost silently walked up next to him and John started scratching his neck. "No," he responded calmly. As Grey Wind came to his side as well and he copied his brother's move. They looked at each other and laughed then. "Bloody hell, those wolves scare the death out of me. How they obey you is not natural, I say," the Small John interrupted as he drank deeply from his ale. He looked at his friend, but it was John who responded. "Well, scaring you isn't the most difficult thing there is, Umber." At this, his friends all started laughing. If you didn't have your damn wolf, I would make you eat those damned words," Snow the Small John scoffed. You would, but I do have Ghost, so there is nothing you can do." His brother laughed as they turned around and followed the guard to the messenger. They walked to Ono of the tents he used to see his lords in and saw the messenger already there. "Tell me, good man, what brings you here and makes you say it is so urgent? A raven from the north came, Your Grace. I was sent here to deliver you the news immediately, the messenger said as he bowed deeply. He still wasn't used to people doing that, but he made sure that he didn't show any signs of his discomfort. The man gave him a letter and he broke the seal and started reading. Behind him, he felt John read over shoulders. The content hit him like an rocks. The Ironborn had attacked the north. They had taken Moat Cailin, were sieging Deepwood Motte and were raiding along the stony shore with a considerable force. This was a disaster. Without Moat Cailin they wouldn't be able to retreat north, nor would his reinforcements ever be able to make it south. The only good thing about was that apparently Victorian Greyjoy had lost almost 2,000 of his most veteran men in the taking of the fortress. The force at Deepwood Motte was led by Asha Greyjoy, Lord Balon Greyjoy's daughter. He didn't know much about her and would ask around to anything that knew. The news might also trouble Lord Galbart, so he would need a plan to deal with this quickly. The last commander angered him to no end. On the raiding party along the stony shore was spotted Aaron Danfair, another one of Balon's brothers. However, it was not Danfarid that led the force. Theon Greyjoy had been seen leading the raiders. The boy he had played with for years. The boy his father had raised like a son as long as he had been in his home. His father had even sent him to King's Landing because he didn't want the boy to feel lonely without him and John. That damned squid, he would show him what they did to people like that in the north. He should have listened to Lord Ricard, those Ironborn are all the same. The man had only been back to the Iron Islands for a few weeks, after leaving for a decade, and already he was pillaging the North's shores. He also became scared. All his siblings and Alis and his unborn child were all in the north. The Ironborn could threaten them. They won't go to Winterfell, his brother stated, clearly seeing the expression on his face. How do you know that? He asked, surprised. Ironborn never venture that far inland. They would be cut off from reinforcements and would have no easy way to retreat. Besides, they would be in hostile territory without any knowledge of the land. No way the forces from Moat Cailin or Deepwood Motte would ever be able to establish supply lines stretching to Winterfell. If they try, either the Mandaelis, Dustins and Sowins or the vassals of the Wolfswood would bleed them dry. It is complete folly. John responded simply. He thought about his brother's words. They made sense to him. Strategically, marching to Winterfell would be folly. They would be far better off attacking Bear Island, Flint's Finger or the Rills or even Barrowton. They might hold it for a lot longer as well. Still, something bothered him. You said no one has any knowledge of the terrain. Well, Theon has. He traveled with father dozens of times. He knows most of the keeps of the center of the north. He knows their families as well. Best of all, he knows Winterfell, he said, unsure about what that unthankful squid would do. True, and Theon is stupid enough to try it, but he doesn't have the manpower. Sources tell of less than 500 men along the stony shore. That's not enough to take Winterfell. Especially now, with all the new recruits raised and being trained. They aren't able to go south now, so they can be put to work fighting the Ironborn, his brother said, managing to calm him. You are right. Besides, the Sowins have a lot of troops nearby as well. Trying to do anything there would be foolish, he agreed with John. Yes, it would. Even if they tried, it would fail. Clee would never abandon Winterfell and he could march there in a day. John said, completely calm. Good. We'll still need to discuss this, the lords. Lord Galbart won't like this one bit, he sighed. Yes, and I don't think Daisy or Lady Mage will either. The Mormont's history is notorious for fighting the Ironborn. Their island has always been threatened by them. They won't like the possibility of having their home attacked. John added. Yes, that's true. He mused. I will call another meeting now. Would you get our lordly friends? I will send men to get Roose Riswell, Sir Ryman Free and Lord Deddings. We will make those Ironborn pay, that I promise you. Of course, Rob, his brother said, and he left the tent. He gave orders to some of the guards to get his other lords and sighed. Why couldn't any of this go without surprises? After his first victory, he heard his father had been killed. After freeing Riverrun and reuniting with Bran, he heard his grandfather was dying. Besides that, his men decided to make him king, not only of the north but the Riverlands too. Now, after Oxford everything seemed to go swimmingly. It seemed that sentiment was clearly wrong, as at the same time the Ironborn must have been sailing to his homeland. He went to one of his chests and got a map from the north out of it and another one more specific of its western coast. How to deal with this? 5 days later. John. He stood in line just behind his brother. He looked up to the enemy walls in the dark, as he closed his visor. To his right, he already saw Blackwolder and his men move out with their ladders and ropes. To his left, the small John was on the verge of doing the same. Rob had asked him to stay at his side for this battle and so he found himself standing here silently, behind the battering ram. He saw his brother strap ice to his back, as he picked up a smaller sword and a shield emblazoned with a growling direwolf. "Men, we march," he called out and they started moving forward. Loyal men started pushing the battering ram towards the castle. It took a while before they were in range of the enemy archers but when they got there, they noticed the castle had awoken. He saw how dozens of men were running up the ramparts. Archers positioning themselves towards them. He looked around and saw that not all their men had seen this. "Men, shields up. Their archers will soon be in position. Believe me, you don't want to get yourself shot before we have plundered their wine cellar tonight." He called out loudly. A roar of approval came from all the men around him, as he saw them all raise their shields. "Don't worry about the wines, no, it'll all be finished by the time you arrive," Owen Norrie said, as the men moved beside him. He heard his brother snigger and Lady Dacey laugh at this, but he didn't respond. He had to focus. Soon the arrows were flying towards them. First a few, then more and more as more of the archers got in position. "Keep your shields up, men, don't let them falter," he screamed once more. By then the ram reached the gate and soon the sound of hardened wood pounding on reinforced oaken gates was heard. He looked around and saw how both the Freys and the Umbers had made contact with the walls. Both seemed to be creating a foothold on the walls, although the sound of heavy fighting was heard even over here. It was only interrupted by the IHYTM of the ram pounding on the gate every 20 seconds. He closed the distance between himself and Rob and protected his left flank with his shield. Soon he heard the sound of wood breaking. "Ready the first 2 groups of swordmen," his brother shouted out and he saw some 200 or 300 swordsmen moved forward close to the wall. 2 hits of the ram later, the gate shattered open. "Fort the north," he shouted loudly as he charged forward with the men. Less than a second later he was stopped in his tracks, as he heard a scream coming from his right. He turned around and saw Rob laying on the ground. He saw how an arrow had hit him in the right shoulder. In the place where the arrow had hit, his tunic was quickly turning red. It was as if time stood still. He was frozen at the sight of his brother. "Protect the king," he suddenly heard Owen shout out loudly. This snapped him back to reality. He immediately ran back and put his shield above Rob. Soon multiple others joined and a small shield wall was formed in front of their king. "Rob. Rob, are you all right?" he asked, the worry clear in his voice. Yes. It hurts like hell, but I think I'm fine," his brother responded and his voice was still clear. "The wound is deep, but it doesn't appear to have hit anything vital," Owen said. "He is losing blood, so we need to get him to a healer in the camp. If we get him there in time, he'll be fine." "Good, I'll take him," he immediately said. Everyone agreed, everyone except Rob. "No," his brother grunted, "you need to lead the men, John. They'll follow you. Take Grey and take command of the force in the center. Take this damned bloody castle for me and if you find that fucker who shot this arrow, throw him from the battlements." The cursing wasn't Rob's usual speech, but he was clearly in pain. "Are you sure, Rob? I want to stay with you, Grey too," he responded, as he saw the grey direwolf nuzzle itself against his brother, clearly worried. "Yes, no, the men need to see a Stark lead them. You're the next best thing that's available and my brother," his brother tried to joke, but the delivery was horrible as it was mixed in with grunts of pain. "Fine, Dacey and Owen, I expect you to lead the king to safety," he said in a very commanding tone. "Of course, John," they said almost in unison. "Grey, to me. We have an archer to kill," he said to his brother's direwolf. The wolf in question looked at him and then back at Rob. It seemed as if he looked at the arrow and connected the dots, as he growled softly and walked up to him. The castle had been easy pickings. Less than half an hour later the remainders of its garrison had surrendered. They had been led by a Sir Rolf Spicer, the brother-in-law of Lord Goran Westerling. Ghost and Grey Wind had outdone themselves. After forcing themselves through the defence at the gates with him and the push of the men, they had ran up the stairs to the battlements. He had followed, as clearing the battlements was his plan anyway. He had seen the wolves kill a man and throw 3 more down the wall, 2 went off the outside and 1 off the inside the yard. It didn't matter, none of them could have survived their fall. He had gotten the surrender of Lady Sybil and her Westerling children. After that he had marched his guards in the castle securing the Lord's chamber for Rob. Lord Goran couldn't use it anyway, as he was rotting in Seaguard's dungeon. After posting multiple sentinels in front of the doors and in the halls and stairwells, he picked up the maester and almost dragged him outside to Rob. After his first treatment they brought Rob inside to rest. Lucas Blackwood and Owen Norrie would take watch tonight, so he left and went to sleep in a smaller adjacent room himself. He was completely exhausted after the battle and the march before, he longed to a half-decent bed. He had no use for anything fancy, so he just slept in what he thought to be the personal servants' quarter of the Lord. He stripped himself of his armor and laid down on the bed. He felt the strains of battle in his arms and shoulders and closed his eyes, hoping he would feel better on the morrow. 10 days later. It was a clear morning and the weather was mild. The sun reflected upon the water of the sunset sea and the sound of an awakening army could be heard. He looked up from the battlements at their army's camp. The men were well rested and in good spirits. Most of the wounded were healed, or if not, they were out of mortal danger and slowly healing. One member of the last group was his brother. Rob is healing slowly, but well. He was being treated by the maester and the daughter of House Westerling, Jane. The girl seemed kind, but his instinct said something fishy was going on. He especially had this feeling when Ghost was in the room. It was as if he could use some of the direwolf's heightened senses. Whatever the case, he would keep an eye out for it. In the meantime, they had received news. Lord Renly Baratheon was dead, killed by his brother Lord Stannis, or a woman if you might believe the rumors. Whatever the case, the woman was dead and the elder Baratheon brother had won much by it. It was said that all the Stormlords and a few of the Reach joined his force. The Tyrells, Tullis, Rowans and most of the other lords of the Reach had retreated back into the Reach. This probably meant that Lord Stannis would be marching on King's Landing. It served the Lannisters well. He hoped Stannis killed them all for his father. Rob had tried to ally himself with Renly through Raven messages, but that all seemed futile now. Thinking once more of his brother, he decided to go to the maester to get the messages and visit him after. He marched from the battlements into the yard and greeted the guards that he came across. In his brother's relative absence, it seemed most of the army accepted him as their new commander. The Northmen certainly did, although most of the Riverlanders refused to listen to him. The largest group of them, the Freys, scoffed at him due to his bastard status. Lord Deddings and his men treated him cordially, but even they would look at him with clear skepticism. The only exception were the Blackwood troops, as Lucas had been given a small detachment of men from his father to join him in the Western campaign. They treated him with respect and followed his orders well, probably due to his good relationship with Lucas himself. He knew Rob wanted him to take control of the army. He was trying but didn't know if it would be enough. He walked up the stairs towards the maester's quarters and knocked on the door. He heard the sound of the man running around before the door was unlocked. "Ah, Master Snow," the man said with some contempt. These southerners were all the same, thinking themselves better simply because of his birth. "What can I do for you?" "I would like to get the messages." "I will take them up to the king myself," he said with a tone that gave no space for arguing. The maester looked irritated at that but relented. He went deeper into his room and got multiple paper scrolls, one standing on its own and the other in a bundle, and gave them to him. He thanked the man and left. Arriving at Rob's quarters he found Ghost guarding the door, but it was no surprise. He knew his wolf was there. He felt it. He knocked on the door and shouted, "Rob, it's me. I have today's correspondence with me." "Come in, John," his brother shouted. He opened the door and went inside. He saw his brother sit up in bed, his chest bare if you didn't count the bandage wrapped around his shoulder. Jane was awkwardly standing next to the bed with Grey nearby. He looked at the direwolf and the beast seemed to scoff, as if saying, "Don't ask me, I don't know what is happening either." He decided to ignore it for now. He nodded friendly to Jane and asked her if he could have some privacy with the king, and she nodded and left. "Word has come, Stark. Don't know what it says yet. I waited on you to take a look at it." Robb nodded silently as he gestured for the scrolls. He handed them over and Robb read them aloud. The first one was a simple message from Lord Ricard. It mentioned how multiple small sellsword companies had been seen docking at Duskendale or Maidenpool to join Tywin's force. The latter town surprised them both. It was Riverlander territory and still held by Lord Mouton. The rest of the message explained how an earlier company had destroyed the town and the Moutongs had been locked in their castle ever since. The Lannisters freely used the docks as they pleased, as long as their numbers were big enough. That was concerning although not world-changing. Whatever they did, they remained control over the port of Duskendale with access to supply Harrenhal. It was the second message that piqued both their interests. "News has come from the Vale. It has been sent on from Riverrun," Robb whispered. He started reading the unusually long message, divided over multiple scrolls, aloud. "To His Grace Robb Stark, son of the good Lord Eddard. Your messages have been well received and I thank you for notifying us about the situation with your cousin despite your familiar ties. I only have questions why your honorable father didn't notify me when I last saw him. Knowing full well what he was about to do in King's Landing, he might have thought it prudent to wait. Multiple Vale Lords have raised their questions to Lady Lysa. Instead of answering the rumors and the nobility of the Vale, she has locked up multiple nobles who questioned her. Even going as far as executing young Sir Michel Redfort. The Vale is now in open civil war. Houses Royce, Redfort, Hunter, Waynwood, Templeton, Belmer and their vassals, most notably the Coldwaters, Tolets and Hardirons, have sided against the Lady Lysa, who is accused of adultery and placing her bastard in the seat of the Arryns. We have rallied around Harold Hardiron, Lord John Arryn's grandnephew, who will from now on take the name of Arryn after his grandmother and will be raised to the lordship of the Vale under the guidance of the above-mentioned lords and lady. Houses Grafton, Linderley, Waxall, Breakstone and Royce of the Gates of the Moon have joined Lady Lysa. She has also managed to raise most of the direct Arryn Levi along with the castles of the Giant's Lance. Most of the other houses have chosen to stay neutral for now. I will notify you and yours of the upcoming battles in the Vale, as a way to uphold and possibly renew the friendship my house had with House Stark under your father. We remember. Jon Royce, Lord of Runestone." The room fell silent after Robb had read the last words of Lord Royce's letter. He looked at his brother and finally said, "It seems the Vale has finally joined in." "It seems so, but we seem to have gotten an extra enemy against us in my aunt and some of the Vale," his brother mused in thought. "Better an open enemy, than a false friend," he scoffed. "Lady Lysa has spurned her family and its words long enough. She has also betrayed her husband, let her pay the price." You're right, of course. Still, this is big news," the answer came. "Lady Lysa seems heavily outnumbered. Most of the stronger Vale Lords have banded together against her. Many of the averaged and smaller-sized lords seem to stay neutral. I don't think Lady Lysa has a chance," he continued, as he realized how many of the strongest lords had joined against Robert Arryn. "There is always a chance, but they seem heavily outnumbered, yes. We will need to closely monitor the situation, but everything seems good for Lord Royce. The only problem is that the Eyrie could hold out for years under siege." Robb said, only moderately happy at the news, clearly worrying about the length of that civil war. That's true, but you forget something, brother." His brother looked questioningly towards him. "What did I forget? Don't you remember the stories of our father from when winter came upon the Vale when he was only 9 or 10 years old? The Arryns had to leave the Eyrie due to the wind and the cold and all had to move down to the Gates of the Moon." He smiled knowingly. Now his brother's face lit up a little. "They'll have to move in a couple of months at the last. The Gates of the Moon is still described as a formidable castle, but not unassailable. That might work. So I wouldn't fret too much. Bronze Yone is a very capable and experienced commander, and so is Horton Redfort, and the latter will never give up for revenge of his son. Good, that means we don't have to worry about the Vale for now. We have a war to fight here, Robb said. At a later time, the Mandaeali fleet could support the Royces if necessary, but for now it's not ready yet. He nodded, before asking any developments of the war here. Not much. A rider has come from Harry detailing his position. He has raided another 7 villages and a small town. He rests at the town now and will soon continue his path. The Great Yon has captured 2 gold mines in the Pendrick Hills and is closing in on Nuns Deep now as planned. Good, what are your plans here? He asked. The moment I'm